And we're live. Okay, welcome Nate. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Pretty good. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Tim's good buddy for the last 2 years.
Oh yeah, we go way back.
We met on Google Plus, and somehow we've managed to stay on good terms, and no one else has. Um, anyway, yeah. So I met Tim. I started this Ask a Christian thing, religious discussion, and my whole goal, despite whatever's about to take place, is to bring people of different views together, and not what we can disagree about and fight all day long, but we can find some common good and agree on stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what it is. That's what I'm about. If anyone else wants to be a part of a reasoned discussion, let me know, add me, circle me, and that's what I do here.
And now, of course, I'm Tim Brooks. I'm the actual original inventor of the religious discussion on Google Plus. This guy's only copying off me. And here we go. So
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
now the topic that I put, or not the topic, I put, and Tim and Nate go at it for the name of it, for what the hangout is about. I put down that we were going to discuss the value of religion. Okay, because I'm not saying it's completely valueless. I'm just saying it's like one man's trash is another man's treasure, right?
Nice.
It's subjective. So let's talk about. First of all, one nice thing about you is that you're not the actively science denying Christians, right? You're firmly on the side of science.
I think science is good for what science does, yes.
What is the good about science?
I think it helps us empirically verify things in our world, and even things we can't empirically verify. It comes up with reasoned theories that seem to hold water, like gravity.
Mm-hmm. About the theories that science provides. What do you think the major benefit of a scientific theory is?
Well, the major benefit of the scientific method, I think that things are empirically verified. So as close to certain as you can absolutely be, I'd say in the natural world, that's the best humanity can get to it.
Okay, I would argue that the most important thing about scientific theories is that they offer predictive value, that they let us literally predict the future. Before without that theory, we couldn't do it. But with that theory, we can actually see what's going to happen before it happens.
Well, you could also do that with a hypothesis on its way to theory, but I get what you're saying. I'm okay with that.
Kind of. Well, if it's a hypothesis and it's been tested, eventually, it is a theory. If enough people test it. So, I would argue that is the most important part of a scientific theory, is that predictive value. Would you deny that?
I can get on board with that. I think it's valuable. Well, I still think my answer stands. Personally, I think it's most valuable that we can get, the closest we can absolutely get to knowing something. That's what the scientific method offers. And then, a close second or maybe even a tie is predictive power.
Okay. Well, yeah, I can see I see what you're saying, but I don't really find a way to distinguish the two of those. Am I fuzzy to everybody else? It looks fuzzy. There we go. But yeah, I don't see a way to distinguish the two, especially when you realize that the definition of scientific theory is indistinguishable from a scientific fact.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
It bothers me. I'm sure it bothers you just as much when people are like, the theory of, well, I said it earlier. I meant to say evolution, but that'll work too. But the theory of gravity, do we have an expectation that we may just start floating away? No, theory, you might as well say fact for all immediate purposes.
Right. Well, no, in fact, there is no difference. Every single scientific fact you can name is really a theory. A scientific theory. They're indistinguishable from the two.
I understand.
Until it's refuted.
Yeah, I think the only argument you can say is in the interest of never saying never. Maybe something totally undiscovered that came from another universe away flips gravity upside down and we all shoot off this planet.
Oh, absolutely.
Unlikely as that sounds, I guess to maintain interest of never saying never, but yeah, I don't think that's really likely.
Okay. Now, what I would argue is that with that the predictive value of a theory, while it being the most important thing, is not the only place where predictive value is important, like in just your average ideas or the lay version of a theory or a hypothesis. The predictive value that is contained within those are what make them useful. Without that predictive value, I mean, it's just like clutter. Like, have you ever heard of phrenology? I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's an old theory about they used to think that you could tell how smart a person was by the shape of their head.
Yeah, I see that.
They would literally look at the skull and say, this person is this smart based on the shape of their skull. Had you ever heard of that?
Just now I looked it up, but it's no wonder why it's not a popular thing anymore.
It's long defunct. They've proven it wrong multiple times over, and there's absolutely no truth to it. And there's no predictive value behind it. You can't actually predict how smart someone is based on so that whole science, the whole idea of phrenology, we threw that shit away because it's trash. It didn't help us.
I think in the interest, I know one is supposed to be a silent spectator, but I think she points out a good thing we should both address. So I don't know. I know you wanted it to be a inclusive thing, but in the interest of accuracy, if the theory explains the mechanism, the fact is what exists. So science just is the why, the mechanics of it. So I think that's good for both of us. We both kind of oopsed on that one.
On what one?
The whole scientific theory is the same as a fact. I'm talking about the scientific method.
No, I'm not saying that I'm saying that they're indistinguishable from each other. You cannot tell a difference between a scientific fact and a scientific theory. They're by all intents and purposes the exact same thing. You can't.
Right, I understand on that part. Like, if you say scientific theory, you might as well say the truth or the fact is. But when we're talking about the scientific method,
because the scientific theory is the fact as far as we know, is the best.
Right, I understand.
Okay, so
we're good.
Okay.
I just thought it would be a good thing to address that.
Back to the phrenology thing. The reason we got rid of that is because it didn't have no predictive value. Now, I would argue that's why we should also ditch your religion, because it offers no predictive value.
Okay, then, if only someone tried to make this case the other day, and well, not exactly. Hold on. So someone tried to make the case that we should ditch basically anything that could not be empirically verified and did not hold to the scientific method. He then said,
that's a bad idea.
how would you get out of bed in the morning? And he proceeded to try to explain for about an hour. So I would say, science is good for the things science speaks about. There's all kinds of things that science does not speak about that are incredibly, immensely valuable. So that is squarely where religion, among other things, philosophy, all kinds of stuff would fall that science can't and doesn't try to speak to.
So do you agree that religion offers no predictive value?
Maybe we wanted to define that a little bit better. I would say...
Does your religion allow you to predict an event in the future that I am unable to predict because I don't have your religion?
Well, if we want to talk about the Bible, or people who claim to have these prophecies that did come fulfilled, not the specific ones, the ones that are really difficult to kind of self-fulfill or make happen.
Like Tyre?
So the narrative of the Bible would certainly have us believe that.
Right, but can you demonstrate that?
I personally cannot. If I'm ever able to, though, if God shows up and he's like, yo, I'm God, guess what? This is going to happen. I will try to get a hold of you first and be like, hey.
The predictive value of religion is limited to stuff that you can't actually predict. For example, you can say that you think there's a rapture coming according to your religion, but you can't actually name when it's going to happen or nothing like that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I don't have any problem with that because, that has nothing to do with my theology. I don't think that has anything to do with Christianity at all. It's not a predictive thing.
Well, I would say without any predictive value, what use is it?
Well, I thought we just covered that.
No, you said that. Well, I mean, I can definitely see there are other types of value. Like we talked about right before this, you would agree that the charlatans find great value in a person's willingness to believe in Christianity.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's put aside the spiritual thing for a minute. So just the tenets or the precepts of Christianity. I think, if someone has an issue with being a good moral person, and they're like, I like taking bath salts and eating people's faces. What can help me change? then please follow this. Certainly the Bible isn't the only place you can go for good moral principles, but that's certainly a useful thing. I think, there's a bunch of good advice, practically speaking, for finances and how to manage your money. I think it's been tried and true. So I think there's all kinds of practical application you can get from the Bible and from Christianity. But again, that's not ultimately what it's about. So the main thing, and I would equate this, to people who are spiritual or consider spirituality a paramount thing in their life. This is the ultimate thing, really the only eternal thing Christianity speaks to. And there's one entity responsible for everything, and the claims of Christ are he's the visible representation of this entity. If you believe that and trust him to save you, quite literally, from yourself, then that's it. That's the essence of Christianity. So all this other stuff may be well and good, and I'll certainly argue there's benefit. I don't think anyone can say there's not benefit. But when it comes down to it, this is the one thing that separates me and those who believe this from everyone else in the world that doesn't. Really nothing else. Not social agendas, not politics, not wars, not rules. It's one single belief.
But you seem to have contradicted yourself when you said that you agree that... Hello? Oh. But when you said that you agreed that there was other ways to get to the same understanding.
What do you mean?
That you said that a person can, if they're eating bath salts and eat people's faces off, and they want to, say, how can I get better? You said that there are other ways to go about it than just Christianity. While Christianity might be able to help.
And then that poses a bigger question that science can't speak to. This is philosophical in nature, but perhaps the only go with me. This is something to be considered. It's a little unfair, but it needs to be considered. Perhaps the only reason anyone can be a good moral person at all, with religion, without religion, just because they're a good moral person without religion, perhaps the only way that is possible is if truly they are created in this image of a benevolent, creator. So, you know how people say we're created in God's image. If that's true, then perhaps that's the only reason, whether you admit it or claim a deity or not, that we can do good moral things. So I understand it's unfair to kind of make that point because there's not really anywhere to go, but it certainly should be considered.
Well,
does that make sense?
I do. It does make sense, but there's also evidence to the contrary. Like there's plenty of evidence as to where our morals came from. Instead of just giving that away to some creator, like you said, and saying that we got that from him or that we only got it because we were made in his image, that he gave that to us. We also know from the theory of evolution that our morality was evolutionarily advantageous. In other words, the people who were able to be more moral in general had more babies. That's why those types of traits were passed along generation to generation and got stronger as we went along. So the fact that we have these morals built into us, and there's even Bible verses that say each person has the morals built into them. To say that we only have these because we were created by a creator God or in the image of an all-loving God or a moral God or however you want to say it, kind of robs us of what it really means to be human.
Well, does it rob us if it's true? I would say, regardless of what we feel robbed or whatever, our pursuit of truth should ultimately be it. So what you said is certainly reasonable, and I don't have huge issues with it, but because I remain unconvinced 100%, it makes sense that, dogs would try to, evolutionary behave better and get along better with tribes, but if you've seen some of these dogs, you would second guess that. I know that's semi-facetious, but you understand where I'm going. Like, I think, evolution tells us a great deal of stuff, but there's certain things that, I don't think anyone should be so confident to say this is an absolute fact in every way, shape, or form forever. Like, we should be like, you know what, this is the best explanation we currently have, but let's keep digging just in case we're missing something.
And I absolutely think we could keep digging. But one of the ways that we actually dig to find out something, when we're actually doing the digging part of the what you're saying, is by using the scientific method. And I would argue that in order to use the scientific method, you use the scientific method to verify a hypothesis, or to create a hypothesis and then verify it. And the one key aspect of a hypothesis that I think that your God idea is lacking is the one feature that a hypothesis must have, which is being testable.
Okay, well, then I guess let me maybe answer that with another question. So I understand, can we be so confident, and if so, how, to say, which I'm maybe you've read something on this, I've not found anything to satisfy me, but how can we really say evolution is empirically verifiable? I understand there's things that we can test, observe, and repeat in our lifetimes, and then this generation in front of our eyes, but then we have to use these results to then logically impose that back on the past, which is fine, but that doesn't qualify as empirical if we can't test it, observe it, and repeat it in real time, right?
But the empirical nature of a fact is not what's important, though. Like I said, of a scientific theory, that the empirical nature of it's not what's important. What's important about a scientific theory is that it lets us predict the future. And
Oh no, it was an independent question.
including theory of evolution. It literally lets us predict the future. That's why the theory of evolution is so highly regarded. It's literally like the second most confirmed scientific theory, next only to the theory of quantum mechanics.
Well, two things I would say. One, yeah, that was an independent question. Just because a lot of people are like empirically verify things like evolution. I'm like, I don't think that qualifies. Anyway, but the second thing is perhaps give us long enough and we'll empirically prove God, and then evolution will be the third most proven thing.
But you don't have a test yet.
Well, neither did evolution a few hundred years ago, 100 years ago.
Well, as soon as the theory of evolution was proposed, or even the hypotheses of evolution, when Darwin first kind of, which he's not really the first person to think of it, but when they first started testing the hypotheses of evolution, the predictive value since then has never been wrong. It provides information about the future over and over and over. It's so useful and so handy. I mean, here's the thing, though. So many atheists that I talk to, they say, well, they wouldn't change their mind for anything. Nothing in the world would change their mind. And I'll tell them, look, if Jesus came to my door and he came into my house and he said, hey, Tim, what's up? He gave me a high five. I felt his hand. He's like, you hungry? I'm like, yeah. So he goes into my kitchen. He cooks me a couple eggs, bring them back. I eat the eggs. And he's like, have a nice day, sir. And he leaves. Would that convince me that the Christian God is real? No, it wouldn't. Because the mind is very powerful. It could play all kinds of tricks. It can make you see things that aren't actually there. But what would convince me is if you could come up with some sort of theory, that part of the theory includes your religious God existing, and it creating some sort of predictive value. If your religious idea was able to predict something in the future that I was unable to predict without that theory, then I would wholeheartedly jump on board. At least until it was refuted or until a new theory came along that explained everything your theory explained and more. Does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
So that is the key. That would convince me that your religion, if not true, is at least useful. Because, true is something that's on a sliding scale, right? The thing we know the most for sure is that we exist. That's like top of the top, right?
Well, some would disagree, but yeah, I think most of us would say we exist.
We're 99.99999% sure that I know I'm 99.99% sure that I exist. Everything else is from there down to zero. There's no 100%. There's no absolute. Nothing's 100% sure. Would you agree to that? It's all on like a sliding scale.
Yeah, tentatively, I'm good with that. Let's progress.
Okay, so if the certainty is not 100%, which it can't be, then all we have to go on is other types of evidences or usefulness. Whether or not something's actually true isn't nearly as useful as if it allows you to predict the future.
Well, I don't know. Let's think about that for a minute. If there is an absolute truth and you can know this, then would you care about predicting the future about, a football game or some events in the next 100 or 1,000 years if the thing you absolutely knew to be true was so much transcendental beyond that? Then predicting the future in like biology or stem cells or something, that wouldn't matter ultimately because absolute truth completely blows anything you can predict away. So I guess it depends what the truth is and what the predictive power is.
We agreed there was no absolute truth. There was only 99.9% certainty. That's the best you can get.
Well, okay, even that 99.9. I mean, wouldn't you qualify the theory of evolution as that, or gravity, like 99.999 repeating?
99.998. It
So
has to
pretty
it has to
darn
be just a little bit underneath me. I exist. So everything else exists as far as I know.
So I feel like we're taking a
99.997%.
stroll down a path. Is there any way we could get to the finish line?
We have to take our time, or else you're gonna, try some funny stuff.
Some neuro-linguistic programming?
One thing I forgot to do when we started this is I
Right.
meant to specifically ask you how you describe yourself religiously speaking, like which particular denomination, which flavor of Christianity.
Uh, I think it's simple. I mean, I really believe the claims of Christ. There's one entity responsible for everything. He's the representation of that. He died. He resurrected. If you believe this and you want to be on Team Jesus, opt in. Trust him. Do as he does. That's really it. Anything else, you can certainly take theology farther because why wouldn't you? You want to know the history, you want to know textual criticisms, you want to know about literality versus, allegory or parables. So you certainly want to go deeper and learn more. But when it comes down to it, that's the one thing. Do you believe the claims of Christ, and are you willing to follow him, do as he does, or are you not? So
Okay.
if yes,
Have you studied the different denominations?
yeah, certainly not as many as they're purported to be. But yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with I think quite a few dozen of them.
Out of the major denominations, which one do you align most closely with?
You could say non-denominational.
None. That's
I'm
like
not. I'm
saying
not trying. I'm not trying to elude this. I
that
really.
was very elusive.
I think it's so simple that to put a bunch of other stuff on it is just stupid and detrimental.
Non-denomination. Well, so there's no denomination that you more identify with than others.
If I really wanted to do this, I'd have to get a list of some of the main ones, and I could probably find a more close one than not. But right now, I honestly, yeah, I don't think I could get one. Non-denominational.
So, do you believe in a literal interpretation?
Probably more than most. Can you expound on that a bit?
In other words, do you believe that when Jesus said, "Knock and the door shall be open, ask and ye shall receive," do you believe that he meant that literally?
No, I don't believe there's a door you need to go find, or the fountain of youth, or anything like that. But I mean, I really try to focus on reading it the way it was meant. So if Jesus is telling a parable, clearly take it as a parable. If something you believe should be read literally, even if it seems rather outrageous, read it that way. So I really want to pursue accuracy. So like a psalm, read it as a psalm. A proverb, read it as a wise saying.
Yeah, but like the part about the whole, truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt that you will only do what is done to the fig tree, but if you even say to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, it will happen. All things you ask in prayer, believing you will receive. I mean,
Yeah.
those are words in red, and he wasn't being like figurative there. He wasn't like being, he was being very literal, and that claim there is testable.
Yeah, I certainly. I guess from a metaphorical point, I get the most of this. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It seems really difficult to take that in a way other than literal. Even though I just took it as a metaphor, that's where I've got the most wisdom from it. But yeah, I think if I truly believe there's this entity responsible for everything, then surely a mountain being thrown to the sea would be within the realm of possibility. So I think there's something to that. Exactly what? I don't know. But there's a lot of people that disagree and say, no, absolutely never read that literal. It is only a metaphor, and then they'll give the reasons. So I'm not, to be fair, to my side as well as yours, I'm not necessarily convinced of the reasons. I think, there is some accuracy to this literal. I don't know exactly what that would be. I've never seen any mountains go flying across the sky and jump in water.
You don't say.
Look behind you. Just kidding.
The test, though, for ask and you shall receive.
Mhm.
I mean, you have any idea how many people have prayed that I become a Christian? Any idea? I mean, it's
Well, there's a little more. There's a little more to that, though. Also, to be fair to my own side now, We're told, which it's, I don't know if 2,000 years ago when they were writing this thing about then, if they foresaw this or if they had problems they were addressing right then. But if you take the totality surrounding this, it what you just quoted says, talking about the fig tree, it says if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you'll say this mountain be moved and go jump in the ocean. But then if you take the totality around it, the rest of the New Testament, the rest of the words of read in Jesus, you learn that we're supposed to, to pray according to the will of God, and then we're told, how to figure this out or whatever. And so it really seems like people in 2014 don't have to limit it and say, well, what it really meant was this. It seems like the authors, they did that for us. So I think when people say, ask for a Lambo and you'll get it, that's inaccurate per the text. So I think there's things like, we're told to pray in God's will. What is that? Well, explore, read it more, and you'll find it. Anyway, so things like that to qualify it.
I'd like to read more to find out, and I'd like just to see if you should be able to pray for a Lamborghini, and I'd like to offer a few pieces of it, because you said that while that verse exists, it doesn't explain the totality, but everything I'm about to read you are words in red, directly from Jesus' mouth, from different books all through the Bible. Let's start with Matthew 7, verses 7 through 8.
Not to be a stickler, but I think I'm going to end up saying we need context for everything you're about to read. Are you just taking like verses here and there and jumping around, or are we going to get some context?
Yeah, well, yes. Everything that I'm reading to you is in the context of our discussion. As far as what the Christian God will do for you. This is and you can check my math as we go along. So because if you know of any context surrounding any of these verses that doesn't apply strictly to what I'm saying, it does, because I'm saying that the New Testament clearly says that you can ask for a Lamborghini and you should get it.
Well, it doesn't clearly say you can ask for a Lamborghini.
Wait, well, let me explain. Let me further on. Let me read the verses that I suggest that say that. So, Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 8. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks the door will be opened. Now let's go to Matthew chapter 18, verses 19 through 20. Again I say to you, that if two of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who is in heaven. For where 2 or 3 have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst. Now let's go to Mark chapter 11, verses 24 through 25. Amen, I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes what he says will happen, it shall be done for them. Therefore I tell you, all that you've asked for in prayer, believe that, and you will receive it. Now let's jump to Luke chapter 11, verses 9 through 13. And I tell you, ask and you will receive. This is Jesus talking now. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. Now we'll jump to John. And whatever you at John chapter 14, verses 13 through 14. And whatever you ask in my name, I will do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything of me in my name, I will do it. Now let's jump to further on in John, chapter 15, verse 7. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. Keep in mind, everything I've read so far are direct words from red. Jesus said this stuff. Further on in John, chapter 15, verse 16. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appointed you to go bear fruit that will remain. So whatever you ask the Father in my name, he will give you. Now we'll go to John chapter 16, verses 23 to 24. On that day you will not question anything about me. Amen, amen, I say unto you, whatever you ask in the Father's name, he will give you. Until now you have not asked anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, so that your joy may be complete. He is very clear about this. Anything you ask for, if you believe it, if you are a true believer, you will get it. I'd say that's testable. I say that it's obvious that Jesus lied over and over and over.
I would say, besides that last part, there's plenty of people that probably agree with you. But I'm so glad you started with what did you start with? You started with Matthew 7. I'm so glad you did. Because remember, before you started this, you talked about, we can test this, we can ask for Lambos, we can ask for whatever. And I said, there are some qualifications that Jesus gives about, the will of the Father, the right things.
Have to believe.
And, yeah, okay. So you started in Matthew 7, at verse 7, I believe. So if you just flip back one chapter, I'm good with calling it providence, but if you want to call it coincidence, that whole chapter is explaining. I'll give you some cliff notes, but it's Matthew chapter 6. But let's start, and I'll just read you the cliff notes. So it talks about having a heart to give to the needy. Doesn't really apply. The Lord's Prayer, ask for God's will to be done, whatever that is. We keep going. We talk about and then he talks about lay up treasures in heaven. So the things of this world are temporal, or they're temporary, and you need to focus on the things in the future, not the things in this world. And then the big part, he talks about don't be anxious for this life. He compares to Solomon, the king, right, who had all this stuff, all these fine clothes, and it says, God even cherishes, like the birds and fields and grass more than him, and all of his riches, all of his glory, all this other stuff. So don't worry about that stuff. Seek what really matters. Seek the kingdom of God. God already knows what you need. So focus on him. And then the very next chapter, he says, go ahead, ask, do this stuff. So we have this predicator, which is why I asked for context, because it's set up so beautifully, you couldn't do it better. Chapter 6 gives the qualifiers, and then chapter 7 is what you read. Does that make sense? So I don't want to say, I want to say that's a general rule, or a good rule of thumb, that I think if we went on all those verses you said and got the context, this is assuming, but I want to say it's going to be a similar thing. But even if, does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. I think he's very clear on this. These verses weren't necessarily taken out of context. They literally are, they stand on their own.
Well, we read chapter 7 before chapter 6, so chapter 6 goes right into chapter 7.
Sure, but it's talking about completely different things. I mean, on chapter 7, it's talking about how you can get rich by praying. I mean, that's...
Well, in chapter 6, he says, this is the Lord's Prayer. This is how you should pray.
Okay. But...
So reconcile those two things.
Ask and you shall receive. Anything that you ask for, you will get it. We know that not to be true.
Well, do you? First of all, that's... I'm not trying to pick apart everything you're saying, but I'm trying to be accurate.
I mean, if that was true, though, I would be a Christian because of all the people that have prayed for me, right?
Well, first of all, subjectively, have you tested this yourself and found it wanting? And then, secondly, of all the people who have apparently prayed for your mortal soul, how many people claim every day, or even on these chat rooms, how they prayed, that it was answered, or they feel it was answered? So I wouldn't say it's absolutely false 100% of the time. So just to start off on a fair ground. Is that fair?
It only takes 2 or more people to be gathered and ask for anything that they want. If 2 or more people ask for it, it will be done.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't know where else to go except, there's very specific qualifiers, so it's not something we're making up in 2014. It's something that goes right along with the text back then. So that's why, when people talk about this stuff, like I think you did better than most, but I hate it when people cherry pick, even Christians who cherry pick for their own needs. I don't like it. I want to be fair. So, there's a reason I think the Bible starts with in the beginning and ends with amen. If you truly read it as the book it is, it's not a dictionary encyclopedia that you just thumb through. So if you read it from beginning to end, I think you get this concise view that really eliminates a lot of questions just like this.
Well, I mean, I've read it multiple times over.
Then you know what I'm talking about.
Well, what I also know is that there is, at no time does Jesus contradict the idea that prayer will, you can get whatever you want from prayer. At no time does he say that you will not get what you want if you ask for it. He never says that.
Okay, so let's.
Instead, he says the opposite, as I read to you.
I understand. So now
and that's a testable claim.
Okay, well, first I'd say test it yourself. But secondly, I'd say let's put on our critical thinking hats for a minute. So if these people back then, let's assume, they could write, so they weren't completely stupid. So how would there either must be more than meets the eye, like I think I've mentioned already, or it is as you say, which is complete crap. And if it was complete crap as you say, then how would these people have ever let that stuff in the Bible unless one of us is wrong, and there's really more than meets the eye. And I think in the interest of that, what I said is more accurate. I think it's more true to the text.
I introduced to you earlier the hypothesis of phrenology. Phrenology. Do you need to test that for yourself to see if that's true?
If I had the opportunity, I wouldn't mind, but no, I understand what you're saying. I don't think I need to test it. But I think if I spent especially years of my life devoted to opposing phrenology, then, but to be intellectually honest, at some point I would have to go with whatever phrenology says, get their claims, get their points, and really test it myself in order to continue opposing it. Just because I feel like it's really dishonest to do that. So, when people, and I don't mean to pick on you, but this comes up quite often. So when people say, I've read the Bible 1,000 times and I know it better than any Christian and there's no God. Why? Like if I wanted to stand in opposition but if I wanted to stand in opposition to Islam or something else or Judaism, then if I really did that on a prolonged basis, I feel the only way to be honest about it is I'd have to give it a shot, and I'd have to adhere to the 5 pillars of Islam, do the praying, do the dietary laws. I'd have to do Islam the way it prescribes, and if I find it lacking, only then do I feel like my claims are valid and continue to oppose it. So I think if people say, I've read the Bible a lot, therefore I don't think there's a God, I don't have a good reason to believe in a God. I think to do that over and over without testing yourself at some point, that's dishonest, because Jesus doesn't tell us, I'm almost done, Jesus doesn't tell us to read the Bible that will eventually be put together a whole bunch. He tells us, like you mentioned, seek, knock, and the door will be open, and it says God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So that's the prescription from the guy in the letters in red, right? So at some point, I think one should really do this the way Jesus says, and if they find Jesus, then okay, I guess good. If they don't, I feel only then is their opposition a little bit more valid and their position is honest. And again, another philosophical point you're not going to like, but I feel that's at least an honest effort. They've given it their best shot. But they really can't say they found it lacking, I think, until they're exiting this world. Because if you're not dead, things can change.
Well, let's talk about where we draw the line as far as when an idea warrants testing. I'm sure you've heard of the idea of, let's say, the germ theory of disease. You're familiar with that?
Vaguely, yeah.
Do you think that we need to test that to see if it's actually true or not?
Can you recap it? Is it something to do with mutations or across?
No, it's super simple. It's just that disease is caused by germs. Microscopic organisms that we can't even see. Well, of course, back then when it was invented, they couldn't see them. But there was this idea that there was these small little critters. Now we know them to be bacteria and virus. They didn't know that back then. But they came up with this idea that there was these microbial little things we couldn't even see, but that they're there, and that's what causes disease, not voodoo spells or.
Okay, I'm with you. And so, what was your question?
Do you think that we need to test that?
No, I think I think whatever testing has been done is enough to give us a reasonable assumption that this is how this stuff is spread, not through someone shrinking someone's head.
Okay, now what about the theory of geocentrism? Do you think we need to test that?
Oh, you're giving me too many big words.
Do you know that? Do you know what it is? It's just the idea that the Earth is the center of everything, and that the sun goes around the Earth.
Okay,
that's another theory. Or
yeah, I'm good.
Do you think we need to test that?
Well, I think we certainly did at one point, right? Because if we didn't, but yeah, now that I think it's been tested enough that it's a reasonable assumption.
And you don't think that Christianity has been tested enough to understand that that those tests are no longer warranted, that we don't have to sit around and pray for a Lamborghini to know that we're not going to get one?
Well, I mean, despite the, I don't know, hundreds of millions, rough guess, I don't have stats, but of all these tons and tons of people that claim they pray, and then, without some coincidental thing or some, final destination type chain of events, they get their prayer answered in a way that they can only honestly attribute to an entity that they call God. So all those people, I think you've got, half a world that'll be arguing with you. I understand why did an amputee pray and not get healed. There are certainly claims of it. So, unfortunately, of these claims, well, I don't know, Google it. I'm not saying they're good claims. What I'm saying is, certainly people will tell you this. People will say they were missing eyes and eye sockets and an eye physically formed. So, I'd say one, either it's a bad claim, or Well, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm just saying people claim stuff. I'm not saying this is some sort of proof. What am saying is it's either a bad claim or there wasn't the proper accredited medical staff and documentary staff to get it and pass it around the world. Or there's a third one, I forgot what I was going to say. So, yeah, I'm just saying because people claim these, but there are certainly people you meet every day that would say they prayed and their prayers have been answered.
Yeah, but you can find people every day that say that they've been abducted by aliens. I mean, it doesn't really matter until you can actually come down
Well,
with
never
the
say
test.
never. But still, though, about testing what exactly? Christianity or certain aspects of it or God? Because as far as I'm aware, there's only a handful of prayer studies that were done, and the best one I found is absolutely horrible, in my humble opinion. It completely goes against.
Are you talking about the heart one?
I'm talking about it was a Harvard medical school something. It was about basically I'm paraphrasing, but look for a Harvard prayer medical study on
I
prayer.
think I know the one you're talking about.
But yeah, so the whole thing was they basically got the chaplain of the hospital, and it was one guy, one denomination, and they asked him a couple questions, not exhaustive. It gave the list, and it was not an exhaustive list of things they asked him to set this up. So he headed it up, and basically they got a bunch of people to say, I believe in God. I believe that prayer can affect some stuff. And then they gave them cue cards to read with a patient's name on it with a structured prayer. And I'm thinking, okay, look, if you want to test this, I understand the medical side. You've got that covered. But from a theological side, if indeed you're trying to test prayer of this God of the Bible, then consult some people. Be a little exhaustive on your theology regarding prayer. Otherwise, you've wasted a perfectly good study, and I feel that's what happened. So, yeah, I would say there certainly needs to be more testing done in prayer specifically.
There was another study done on heart patients where they took, I think they took 300 heart patients and they split them into three groups. They had 100 of each, and they said, this group right here, you're going to be prayed for. This group right here, you're going to be prayed for and know about it. And the second group is going to be prayed for and not know about it. And then there's going to be a third group, a control group, that's not going to be prayed for at all. What they found was, of course, there's no noticeable difference in the group of people who were prayed for and didn't know it between them and the control group that didn't get prayed for. They were the exact same. The one case where there was a difference was in the group who was prayed for and knew about it, and they did demonstrably worse than the other two groups.
So does that mean there's really an evil God that was making bad things happen?
I would say that there was some sort of maybe a stress to perform.
I wonder if the people praying were handed cue cards with the scripted prayer.
They wanted to. Well, it
Yes,
wasn't like that.
God, dance.
What they did was they went to a large congregation, and I believe it was even non-denominational, and asked everybody to pray for this person, and then pray for this person, and then pray for this person, and that sort of thing. It wasn't like one guy praying for it. There was like a lot of people praying for the group of people, both groups of people that were being prayed for. It wasn't just one person.
Yeah, I understand.
I think that.
I mean, I could equate that to like the witches' coven in Massachusetts praying against the Broncos when they played the Patriots.
But why would they do worse?
Huh?
Why would the people that got prayed for and knew about it do worse?
Well, that's a good question. I
would say performance anxiety was my answer.
What?
Performance anxiety. Like they felt like since they were being prayed for that they had to get better, which added stress to them, which stops your. It doesn't stop, but it can affect your healing or your recovery. Stress can, obviously. And I would say that's why they did worse.
Perhaps. I think there's a whole myriad of things. I mean, it could have been the flying spaghetti monster, peace be upon him, but we really need to consider everything we can consider. And one of those things is there's an X factor that simply we don't know. So, I mean, I think we can cite cases all day long of claims of God healing people when they ask and claims of, nothing happening when they ask. So I don't think this is a shock to anyone.
I don't think we should have to consider everything. I don't think we have to consider phrenology anymore. I don't think that we have to consider.
Well, no, I mean, as it relates to heart disease, I'm not saying phrenology played a part in the heart disease patients.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying there's some ideas, like the idea of prayer, that we don't have to consider. I mean, we can tell that talking to yourself doesn't actually affect the rest of the world. I mean, you can affect your own brain. You can do different, meditation is just as beneficial as, praying for yourself, that sort of thing. There's no reason to think that prayer has any usefulness.
But again, I feel like we're riding a hamster wheel. What about all these people who will say this, and some will have,
All these
I'm
people on both sides.
yeah, but you're the side you're taking is prayer has no effect. We should not consider prayer at all for anything ever. It is effectless. But then you have this whole tons and tons of people claiming just the opposite. So
But
that
you
means
have tons and tons of people claiming that they've been abducted by aliens. That doesn't matter.
maybe they have.
They're claims. Remarkable claims would require remarkable evidence, correct?
Was that Hitchens or Dawkins? I think it's Hitchens' razor. Yeah. Anyway,
It's close to Hitchens' razor, but it's not really. But
yeah, but I mean, some people will have this stuff,
Carl
and again,
Sagan.
like,
I think it was Carl Sagan that said that.
was it?
Carry on.
Anyway, but I mean, there are plenty of people that will have, things like, I don't know, what have I seen? Like, document or like X-rays and things like this of like, tumors, date stamped, and they'll have doctors saying, which science won't say, and most doctors won't say, it's a miracle from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What they will say is they should be dead, and they should be dead in 3 weeks. And 6 years later, I mean, I'm not telling you things you don't know. Like the claims are there and evidence is there. The only problem then is it's not the right kind of evidence. But when you get a doctor saying, I'm trying to think of an example, but like if people's just black, or just like their whole rib cage, their whole bones are just black with cancer, and then 2 weeks later there's nothing, then a doctor will say, I don't know what caused that. That doesn't make any sense. And then you'll have this person who's been praying to this God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob saying, it's a miracle, God did it. So I think there's certainly documented cases.
Isn't that an example of the common logical fallacy of an argument from ignorance? I don't know, therefore I do know God did it. I don't know what caused me to get better, so therefore I do know what caused it. God did it.
Well, no, that's two sides of the coin. One is the doctor saying, I don't know what caused this, and the other one is a person who you said claims need to be backed up with evidence, so they're making a claim, and now they're backing it up with evidence, and they're attributing it to God. And they're like, well, how do you know this God healed you? How do you know it wasn't Thor? How do you know it wasn't some other God? Well, it seems the first step is whatever deity you're praying to, that would be the one you'd want to start attributing things to. And then if they give you, the evidence you talk, the medical documentation, then is it the wrong kind? Like, how far do we need to go down this road? And again, I guess this isn't a subject near and dear to my heart. I do believe in the power of prayer. I think I've already answered. The Bible qualifies this. Seek the kingdom of heaven, seek God. Don't worry about the stuff here and now. Your eternity is what matters. So that's kind of my stance. So I'm kind of arguing something I don't really care. Not that I don't care about it.
But you are a firm believer in intercessory prayer, right?
Yeah, I believe in the power of prayer. Yeah, the mechanics of it. I think the only mechanic we're given from Jesus is to pray, and to pray with good motives or a sincere heart and things like this, and for the right cause and God's will that I believe the Bible describes. So yeah, I believe these things. That being said, there's not a whole lot of mechanics behind this. Like it's not like an internal combustion engine blueprinted out for us. We're told to pray in the right spirit with the right motives in God's will. So
I think
take that as you will.
The verses that I read earlier was a clear indicator of how it's supposed to work.
Well, we can go through every one and get the real context, but I think just from the very first one you mentioned, all I did was flip back a page, and I felt like it explained it perfectly clear. So, if you want to take the time, I don't know if we do, but we could go through, and I think, I'm convinced that you'll see something like that in all these things going forward.
Have you ever went to the hospital in an ambulance?
No.
You ever been like a car accident or nothing like that?
I've had plenty of car accidents, never been in an ambulance.
Okay, well, I would argue that the entirety of society considers intercessory prayer. I mean, many people in society would argue that intercessory prayer works, like you yourself. But I would say if people actually believe that we would have, people that have, like as you said, the correct intentions and the right, moral fortitude and the correct religion and all, and the right denomination, the right everything, and they would have one of these guys in every emergency room. And every time somebody came in from the hospital, just in case it works, I mean, not even to say that they were sure it does, but just in case it works, they would have, one of these preachers, as soon as you wheel off the back of the wagon, start praying for you, just because it might work, right? But we don't, because we don't even consider it to be a possibility. I mean, we don't even think of it as something that's even logically consistent with the way the world works. It's absolute joke to think that when you go into a hospital. I mean, if I went into a hospital and saw a doctor praying for me, I'm going to a different hospital. I mean, they're clearly
Right,
not
man.
doing things right. What
Right.
you?
Are you just gonna jump
I mean,
off?
no, I'm going to request, like, hey, take me to St. Francis.
Well, I mean, Catholic hospitals have chaplains. Maybe it's a funding issue why they're not on call standing at the ER door.
A funding issue. No, if it actually worked, I mean, I know that if I could actually pray for somebody and make them better, I would do that I would stand at the hospital doors and do it for free. I mean, it wouldn't even be. I mean, just the whole idea of it is so absurd that it's just I mean, I don't understand how you can even consider it to be possible.
But this is what bothers me, because you're taking the stance the people you oppose take. You're like, how can all these people claim that it works and there's no results? But you're claiming it does not work, and that's just a claim. And I would say, you can have evidence to back it up, but I mean, you can go find the evidence you want, but I would say, if you are pursuing an intellectual, honest course, you need to seek out these people who claim to have big stuff. You're the one doing this. The biggest things people claim that they have evidence, they claim they have evidence for, and test this. Go through it, find the evidence. So instead of just saying it doesn't work, I have a lot of evidence that says it doesn't. Well, there's a lot of people claiming and backing it up with apparently evidence that says it does. So we need to either investigate this stuff.
Where's the evidence that says it does? Where's the evidence that says it does? I mean, all you've got is circumstantial, hearsay.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying, if you Google right now, medical documentation for
efficacy of prayer
or something, like you're aware of this world, right? Like you've seen, X-rays, doctor testimonials, doctor reports, medical exams, all this stuff. Like, look, this is evidence, and the doctor will say, this is evidence that something catastrophic should have happened, like death, and when we gave them 3 days to live, and they were on their deathbed, and they had their dear old grandma come in and pray or whatever, now here it is 10 years later, and we don't know what happened. And you have dear old grandma saying, it's a miracle.
Well, sure. I mean, you're familiar with confirmation bias, right?
But then what is it? So if the doctor says
confirmation bias.
No, not that. If the doctor says he doesn't know what it is, scientifically it's unexplainable. Well, we should withhold judgment and investigate the crap out of that to find what happened.
You said that wrong. Just because we don't know the answer does not mean that it's scientifically unexplainable. It means that it's not yet scientifically explained.
Okay, well then God's not scientifically explained just yet. Give us a few years.
Obviously. You think at some point in the future there's going to be a way to test the God theory?
I don't know, perhaps. I'm sure Darwin thought that his, the evolution would be more concrete in a while. He was right.
I don't understand how you can see the entirety of society's unwillingness to even come close to considering the idea of intercessory prayer. It doesn't fit in with reality. If it did, I mean, we would know that it would be clear cut. I mean, there, like I said, we would have preachers at the hospitals praying for everybody that rolls in, but we don't, because we know that it's not going to help. How do we know that that's not going to help? I mean, the hospital does.
No, you're the only one saying you know.
But the hospital does hundreds of things.
Every doctor ever?
No, the hospital does hundreds of things that they don't know if it's going to help you, but they do it anyway because it might. I mean, small things, you know what I mean? Like clean off your bed, or before they put you in a hospital bed, they make sure it's clean. Dozens and dozens of things that they do ahead of time that might help you just a little bit, but they don't have somebody praying for you. Why would they do that? That would be just. I mean, you're saying that it positively works, but yet the entirety of the medical industry says it's a joke.
So many things. Quickly, 3 things now. I believe they're in the power of prayer. That does not mean I believe it works 100% of the time. I said I don't know.
But if it worked ever.
Oh,
If it worked at all, we would have a preacher
yeah,
there.
and see that. Yeah, that right there. Like, all I'm saying is that is an extraordinary claim.
What is?
That it never works ever.
No, no, that has never been demonstrated to work. That nobody has ever demonstrated that prayer works.
Have you
Obviously,
looked?
they've claimed it.
Okay, well, find the
They
claims.
claimed it, but they've never actually demonstrated it. You can't say this guy can't say, "Wow, I figured it out." If I pray for somebody, sometimes it works. That doesn't happen.
Okay, two things I'll say real quick. So about the things that you would consider good medical evidence. Take religion out of it for a minute. So if a doctor says, okay, this guy should be dead, everyone agrees his whole body's just cancer ridden. He's got like till the end of the day. And then they come back and they're like, they re-X-ray him. They're like, hey, this is all gone. His bones look like they're brand new. Da 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 da. There are these cases. No one's attributing it to religion. Hold on. We're not talking about religion. So find these X-rays. Find the doctor's statements. Like, God, they've been on CNN with doctors talking. So I'm saying if we don't know the answer, it would behoove us, instead of saying it's not God, prayer doesn't work, we still have a huge question mark here. Let's find out why this guy went from dead to completely not dead.
Absolutely, we should look. We should absolutely try to figure that out. And scientists and hospitals and doctors often do try to figure out why a patient got better unexpectedly or inexplicably.
And then it's like, how much exhaustion do you need on that before you would say, okay, we've had a person screaming over here that they prayed to God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that's why healed them. We've exhausted everything. We simply don't know. Like, how much exhaustion do you need before you're like, okay, let's take their claims. This perhaps warrants further investigation. Maybe there's something to what they're saying.
Here's what you do. We have done that, and that, in fact, that study that I mentioned earlier was the embodiment of your question just now.
The heart study?
Yes, the heart study is the taking of saying, okay, there are people that get better unexplicably, and they don't say, we don't know why, so therefore whatever idea they have must be the truth. That's not how explanations work.
Well, I'm okay with that though. The study, the study's a step in the right direction.
You notice nobody's ever been cured from terminal cancer, ever, no matter how hard somebody prayed for them.
That's exactly what I've been. That's exactly what I've been referencing.
No, not terminal cancer.
What?
Not terminal cancer, obviously. No, nobody's ever been cured of terminal cancer. By definition, it was terminal.
Well, I guess if they're living now and it's all gone, then so how been cured of terminal cancer? So resurrected?
No, I'm saying that even cancers that were at the point where it's terminal, it's never just changed. It never just went away.
That's exactly what I've been talking about. And again, this is just stuff I came across. Like, these aren't like people I know that I'm like, yes. And I'm confused that you haven't. I'm confused that you haven't seen the same stuff I'm talking about and that I'm referencing.
I have. You're referencing stories like Stephen Hawking is a great example. He was told that he wouldn't live beyond the age of 22. And now here he is in his elderly age, completely revolutionized physics, still scrolling along fine. They said he wouldn't live past the age of 22. He is an atheist, and there's no reason to think that prayer caused him to be better, since he is an atheist.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to accuse him of that.
What made him last longer than the doctors predicted? They don't know, but they're not going to just say, we don't know, therefore God did it, or we don't know, therefore somebody must have prayed for him.
Of course
we try to find out the actual reason. Why would we go any farther? If a person says...
See, I'm with you until you say things like the actual reason, like it can't possibly be prayer.
The reason I said that was because if a doctor comes into the room and says, man, your lungs have gotten so much better than they were last time. Has somebody prayed for you? That is so ridiculous that, I mean, it's a laughing. You would want to get a new doctor right away. I mean, even a Christian that heard that would be like, Come on,
You
we need
know,
a real doctor.
I think we can move on, but I can't help thinking that you are the counterpart to the person screaming up and down the hall that they took, a dosage of Tylenol for a cold, then they prayed, and now God healed them. You're the counterpart of that. Like saying no prayer works ever. I can't tell you why. I haven't, I don't have empirical evidence this is why, but I really believe it.
No, 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 no. I wasn't saying that it absolutely doesn't. Just that we have absolutely no reason to believe it does.
Well, keep digging.
I mean, how much farther do I have to keep digging into
Well,
phrenology?
preferably they would do more than one heart study per generation.
But do we have to keep digging into phrenology just to make sure that
Well,
maybe
well,
the skull does have something to do with the intelligence of a person?
well, you're more versed at this than I am. So, how much phrenology research was done to conclude that it's worthless?
Do
I would
they?
say not nearly as much, or I would say not nearly as much has been done regarding prayer to conclude the effectiveness or otherwise of it. Like, I'm only aware of the Harvard study and the Hart study, and maybe like a couple others. So, if we're talking about 2,000 years since this stuff was written, and we've only got a handful of studies regarding prayer, we need some more studies.
But we have more than that. We have the understand, a decent understanding of the way the world works.
Which
That
means we don't need to test it.
no, that it's practically and basically untestable, even under your own definitions. When you say, well, of course it doesn't always work. Of course it doesn't. Even if
Well, I
all
mean,
the conditions are met, specifically to your requirements. Like if you laid out a list of requirements in order for intercessory prayer to actually work, if all those requirements were met, we know that we're not going to get a noticeable improvement in effect. And the reason we know that is because if that was the case, and I'm sure it's been tried multiple times by thousands of people, that would make a difference. Somebody would come out. Do you understand how big of a paper or how big of a reception? Somebody would win the biggest Nobel Prize and be the most famous person on earth if they could prove that their prayers were being answered.
well, I certainly wouldn't want you to head up the study like this. I don't know if this is funny or what, but the Christian is encouraging the atheist here to keep an open mind, man. Just to be like,
Well,
well, we can
okay.
test it, but it's not going to work.
Look,
Debbie Downer.
I'm saying it's already been. We've tested phrenology just like we've tested prayer. They're both been tested, and we still have no. And I would say that
I mean,
prayer has been tested way more than the phrenology thing. Well, phrenology was tested pretty extensively. Like there's hundreds and hundreds of skulls in glass jars.
can I say two things real quick?
Yeah,
I'd like some evidence for that, by the way.
which
How many studies of prayer have done? Maybe we can find a Google search or something. But I would be curious the evidence.
do
The
you think
stat.
that do you think that anybody in a Christian family that gets cancer or gets hit by a car or any of these people, do you think that any of them go without being prayed for by their fellow Christian comrades?
I'm sure they do, and I think there's a lot who claim they get better. But anyways, what I wanted to say was, I think, Jesus also talks about. He says, you will do greater things than I've done. It's the narrative has him raising dead people, turning, water into wine. All these other things. So he says you're going to do greater stuff than this. So keep in mind there are people who claim, God's raised people from the dead. I understand, but so why don't you see this stuff happening? I would say. And then the second thing is, I really think your argument was better when you talked about all the Christians praying for your soul. That certainly falls closer in line, I believe, with with what Jesus qualifies in Matthew 6 and other places. That pray like this: Your will be done, da da da. Not so much about stuff of this world, but for eternal things, the kingdom of God. So I would, in my humble opinion, I would ditch the medical argument and really focus on why are you not a Christian yet. And to that, all I would say, in response is, well, I believe you have free will. But I really think that's a much better argument than any medical science or prayer, because this falls more closely in line with a non-selfish, eternal, ultimate kingdom of God type thing.
But if Christians had a better chance of recovering from a heart attack, or a better chance of recovering from a stroke, or a better chance of recovering from any illness at all, I think that would be blatantly obvious.
Well, what about like studies? And I'm really out of my depth here, but what about studies that I've heard, and I don't know the I don't know the reputation of these people, but we can probably Google this. We should screen share and do that. But stats about people of faith who seem to have happier, better, overall healthier lives. I mean, is that something to it? Is it are
Yeah,
they
actually
deceiving
there is.
themselves? Is it a placebo effect?
There's a
Or
really good study about that, and let me explain the results to you. What they found is that it is true that Christians who go to church and have friends, they need to have friends that go to church with them, friends that they know from outside of church. These people who have that live a happier life than people who either A, don't go to church at all, or B, who don't have, and don't have friends. But what they found is that people who go to a coffee shop once a week with mutual friends have the exact same level of happiness, report the exact same level of happiness as the people who have friends that go to church. It's not about the actual going to the church or actually the religion at all. It's the camaraderie of friends and fellowship that makes the happiness in that you see, the increased happiness that you sometimes see towards Christians, because they gather in large groups and they're a lot of times they're friends, and they live a happier, people who have friends live a happier life.
well, that's interesting what you say, but certainly these people who were polled, I mean, I'm sure some of them went to atheist churches, or community
They
atheist
consider the
gatherings.
coffee shop the atheist church in that study.
Well, okay, if a bunch of atheists went to a coffee shop and they don't claim faith, and if they, which we're really conjecturizing at this point, but if they were part of this poll, why are
They
they
were
found to be unhappier and more
no,
unhealthy?
no, no. They were found to be just as happy as the Christians who go to church.
You said people in a coffee shop. You didn't say faith specific.
No, I'm saying that the people who go to church and they report a higher, and have friends that go to church, report a higher level of happiness than either A, people who go to church and don't know anybody there, or B, people who don't go to church or have social events with friends. But the people who do have social events with friends that are non-religious still report the exact same level of happiness as the. And let me find the study for you. Well, I mean, I don't really do it on air, but it's pretty easy to find real quick. I'll get it for you real quick.
So
Happiness.
would you say it's similar to laughter?
No. Religious happiness study. Sure. Religion and happiness. Oh, it come up on Wikipedia. Looky there. Has been studied by a number of researchers, and religion features many elements addressing components of happiness as identified by positive psychology, like chanting. Chanting can make you happy. Do you know that?
I have heard that. Catholics have the market on that.
Let's see here. Where is that? The Handbook of Religion and Health from 1992. Oh, there it is. That's the study I was talking about. Those affiliated with religion, the review of 147 independent investigators found the correlation between religiousness and depressive syndrome was negative 0.96, indicating that greater religiousness is mildly associated with fewer symptoms. Let's see here. The surveys in the Gallup National and Pew Organization conclude.
So clearly there are a lot of these. Not all are to deal with, I have friends. Like this one makes no mention. It's Psychology Today. It's in 2010, more recent than 1992. But yeah, just to say there's a lot of them, so it'd be interesting to go through these. But it talks about, religious people are slightly happier than people, except apparently there were no difference in the Netherlands, for whatever that matters.
They're also not very religious in the Netherlands, in case you didn't know.
I do know, yeah.
So, I mean, haven't we just about removed all the value of religion? I mean, we've already proven. Hold on, just from our talks, we've shown that you have no predictive value from your religion. You have no that there's no evidence that intercessory prayer actually works. Just conjecture. There's no reason to think that religion itself will make you happier. I mean, those three right there What more could you? What more could? What does your religion give you? It seems like it gives you nothing but guilt.
Man, you're just loaded. Stop now before you load anything else. So what you said, I certainly have some problems, but I feel, in the ultimate sense of stuff, I can give you all that. I mean, you certainly are aware I don't agree with you.
Give me what?
Whatever you just said about, prayer doesn't work, it's just conjecture, which is certainly fine for the person who claims to be healed. Religion doesn't make you happier, da-da-da. So everything you just said, let's transcend that for a minute. Like the very first, I think, line of this conversation, I said there's one eternal ultimate point to this God of the Bible. Not all religions, just one entity created everything, one Jesus. So the ultimate point of this is believe his claims, believe he died and resurrected, and live like he lived. And that's it. That's the ultimate, eternal, everlasting life, live forever and ever and ever since. So that's the one and only real thing that matters. As far as practical application in this life, he also says, so that's the eternal ultimate sense, right? The one point, binary.
The untestable.
Huh?
The untestable sense, you mean?
Yeah, sure. But when people, yeah, okay. So let's revisit that in a second. But then for practical application, point number 2, if we're here in this natural life right now, the natural world, he says this is how you can have, life and life to the fullest. This is how you can have, joy, like peace. He doesn't say nothing bad's going to happen. He does say when bad crap happens, this is how you can be content when your world is falling around you, by knowing him and having this true spiritual connection. So it makes sense, at least per theology, that, if you believe this God of the Bible, that's ultimately what matters. Believe him, trust him, sweet, go live your life, do good stuff. Then for practical application, people will say, well, is this personal relationship or spiritual connection or divine relationship? However you want to term that, for the people that say that, myself included, we really believe we've got the spiritual connection, and that's what helps us, somehow be content. So isn't that really what everyone in this natural world is looking for, is to find the way, or to find it, and to find their true purpose in this life and to be happy. Some may find that through I don't know, careers. Some may find it through yoga, or some may find it through some sort of meditation. But, the one thing Jesus does say is you find it through him to its maxed out, fullest potential. So I would say for the people that I believe I've latched onto this and found it, I would say that's great. That's exactly the purpose Christ serves in my life, and exactly the purpose he says he came to serve in my life. And then, I believe this, I believe I've had this subjective, religious experience, that it's not just a good idea to believe words in an ancient book, but they really are more lively. They're really portraying this God that really exists and really just wants us to believe in him. So I would say that's exactly, it's like 2 points. Live forever and be content and happy here on earth. That's really the point. So prayer, politics, social agenda, none of this matters.
No, I'm talking about, well, let's talk about usefulness. How is your religion
Well,
useful?
first, does that make sense? Because
No, it doesn't make sense, because basically what you started off with was the only way to test your idea.
Well, do you want to talk about usefulness or testing? Because what I just said to you, can you see at all how what I just said is useful, with me being like, I've found my way and I'm a happy, content person? Do you see how that can be useful at all?
You said it is as useful as yoga.
No, I didn't exactly. I said some people feel like they find their way or their satisfaction in these other things. But I said, Jesus,
meditation, all that sort of thing.
Huh?
Meditation is a big one.
Yeah, whatever. But I'm saying, and for those people who, if like, hey, when your world's burning down around you, Jesus says he promises peace that you can't understand, but you're okay, you can cope with this. And if they're like, yeah, I do indie yoga or whatever, then okay, it's hard to argue with a personal experience. So if you truly say you're at peace and fine when your world's crumbling around you, I'll take you at your word. But Jesus promises this maxed out. That
doesn't require that's not a usefulness of your religion. That's a usefulness of maybe a positive ideology, because you get the same benefits, like you said, from yoga, meditation, Islam, Buddhism.
Well, there's 2 things. First of all, I'm saying it's some sort of benefit, people will say, and then secondly, I'm taking their word for it. So, I don't have a lot of reason to doubt people that, if crap happens and they seem very zen-like in a state, I'll take them at their word. but I feel like it's never the fullest potential it could be. But again, this is the second point. But you understand, right, how if I'm a happy, content, at peace with myself, Nate, that's certainly useful every day, all day long. If I was struggling or looking for something, or
I do. Yeah, I could see. No, I see what you're saying. So there's two things I wanted to address about that. I would argue that your happiness is not due to Christianity itself.
I'm sure you would.
Well, because other people, like Buddhists and all these other people, claim to be just as happy as you are. Now, but what I hear you saying is that they could be just a little bit happier if what they were, using to get happy was Jesus.
I mean, you may say heroin. I'm just
right?
saying, this is these are kind of my thoughts. But again, we're talking about what I feel. What I feel is secondary.
A Buddhist who gets happiness from meditation could get just a little bit happier if he did it with Jesus. Is that what you're saying?
Full disclosure, that's kind of how I think about it. But again, it doesn't matter. It's a non-issue. Like if we all have sucky crap.
All those?
What? Hold on. If we all have sucky, crappy, non-peaceful lives, this is only secondary. So this whole one and only ultimate overarching point: believe Christ, trust Him to save you, follow Him. That's it. You're done.
And therefore you'll live a happy life.
I think that's a byproduct. I think a lot of it is, we do have a brain. So I think a lot of
byproduct. How can you say it's useful for that application?
For what application?
For living a happy life. I would say there's as many miserable Christians as there are any miserable.
I'm glad you brought that up. And I think, I think there's a lot of things all day long, and there's reasons for that. I think we do have free will, and I think, perhaps we shouldn't. But yeah, you see all these people saying, I follow Jesus and you suck, and let me tell you why I hate you so badly. But Jesus loves you. I'm on your side on this. I don't think it should be. And, I haven't always been this happy, content, at peace person. I was pretty nasty before a while ago. I don't know. But I think there's a real, it's like when I say, believe Jesus, trust Him, follow Him, that's it. That's it. But you really need to get it. So I think a lot of people are like, I trust Jesus. Okay, I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna live my life. Okay, well, God's great, sweet, whatever. But I think if you really get this, like whole spiritual, divine connection stuff, and this God of everything really showed up for you, and you're like, okay, I really got it. I got it in my head. I got it in me, in my essence. I think you're gonna see things change. So I don't know how you can best absorb that. Sixth sense, gut feeling, intuition, spiritual connection, but I think that's the big separator, is a willingness to really live as Christ lived. He wasn't concerned with a lot of cares and crap of this world. He was concerned about, this will of God. So I think you see a lot of nasty Christians, you meet them on here every day, I do too, who you're like, maybe you should just trust this Jesus guy a little bit more than you do, or maybe you should ease up on some of this other stuff. So I'm not arguing against you, I'm actually kind of with you in that regard. But I don't think it's because of any fault of God's or whatever. I think it's totally because, people either aren't willing to give up some pursuit that's frivolous of something, or money, or career, or I don't know. I think
classic Christian argument that's the classic Christian argument that they're doing it wrong.
Can you say anything good?
No, it is
after
true.
What I say.
Everything that it all boils down to, like, if I read the Bible and I still don't believe it, oh well, you're doing it wrong. You need to open your mind up, or you need to read.
To be fair, yeah, I understand that you're doing it wrong, but I mean, try to see the forest through the trees a little bit here. If you're like, hey, God's great, and you go down and burn orphanages, someone's probably going to be like, okay, look, I don't want to come across as judgy, but I think pillaging orphanages and burning them down is maybe doing it a little wrong. Maybe you need to explore this God concept a bit more.
Maybe
so that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying like no true Christian or anything like that. I'm simply
maybe instead you should be bombing abortion clinics, right?
What?
Maybe instead you should be bombing abortion clinics.
In what world would you think to say that?
Just the Christian world. I mean, they do. That's who does that.
So where Jesus says your job is to love God and love people, you get bomb abortion clinics. If you were a Christian, I would say perhaps you'd want to revisit this Jesus thing, because bombing abortion clinics is not cool.
I just wanted to change the subject just for a moment here.
Mission accomplished.
Subject on this. What do you think the God of the Old Testament or New Testament? Do you think that God is pro-life?
Um, I don't see why he would want to end life. This is my opinion. I think all life is valuable, but he's God, and there's only so much information we have in the Bible. So
No,
everything
no,
I say
he
is,
talks about it.
yeah.
He
Well, I
talks
mean,
about which lives are valuable and which lives aren't. Do you know about that in the Book of Numbers? You know what
you
the
got it
Book
right.
of Numbers is, right? Like counting. I mean, like talking about how many Christians there are, and which Christians are Christian. Book of Numbers. Have you familiar
I'm
with
familiar
that?
with the book of Numbers. What are you trying to ask about it?
Well, do you know when you're supposed to count a person as being a person according to the Lord in the Book of Numbers?
Do you have a reference?
Do I have what do you want, a verse?
Yeah.
Okay,
If we're talking about the Bible, what are you talking about?
I'd like to get you a verse. One moment, please.
How long have we been on here?
Uh, Not long enough to prove that your God's a fairy tale, I guess. We'll get there, though.
Eternity begins now. I don't know if there's ever enough time for that.
I mean, at least you should see that I have no good reason to believe in your God, right?
Well, yeah, I totally take you at your word. If you feel you have no good reason to believe, I feel like that's the only valid response to not believing is you really don't feel like you have a good reason to believe. I think some of that may be because, people haven't explored properly. I know you explored the
You did
wrong
it
way.
wrong. There you
Yeah,
go.
you did it wrong. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's some people who've like, I don't have a good reason to believe in God. I'm like, have you ever done anything related to religion at all? Well, no. Okay, well, maybe if you do, maybe you'll find something that changes your belief. But yeah, Tim, you probably did it wrong.
Of course, that's what they always say. I mean, I've been hearing
You know
that.
what? I actually think there's something to that. I think you said you read the Bible a bunch and weren't convinced. And I said, Jesus, the guy we say we serve, says he gives a prescription. Says, seek, you'll find, knock, and the door will open. God's the rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So you actually did it wrong.
Okay.
Or at least he did not follow the prescription. Like if I said I was trying to see if there was credibility in Islam, and I just said I won't eat pork. Well, I did it wrong. I didn't do their prescription. I need to adhere to the 5 pillars and things like this.
Oh,
So there is some truth to that.
okay, there's, let's see. I'm looking for the one I was just telling you about. D&B. Oh, Numbers 3:15, in chapter 3, verse 15 through 16.
Numbers.
Number the children of Levi after the house of their fathers by their families. Every male from a month old and upwards thou shalt number them. And Moses numbered them according to the word of the Lord. The only time he counted someone as a person is if they were older than 1 month.
Oh, come on, Tim.
That's what it
Better
says
than
right
this.
here. It's very clear on this. Fetuses and infants less than 1 month old are not considered persons in the book of Numbers. They are not counted as people. It clearly says that. Again, in the book of Leviticus, it says, and if it be from a month old unto 5 years old, then thy estimation shall be of the male 5 shekels of silver, and for the female the estimation should be of only 3 shekels of silver. So that tells us that men are worth more than women, and that they're not worth anything if they're not at least a month old. They're not even worth 1 shekel.
That is
Not even 1
absolutely.
shekel. That's what it says.
That is amazing. I want to respond, and I guess I will give my opinion, but I really feel we can let people read this for themselves, and they'll draw a proper conclusion. It's talking about a census. It's counting the people. So
They're not counted as people until they're a month old, right?
does that mean they don't count as a human life, or they don't count as a number in the tribe that's traveling across the desert?
Right, they're not counted.
As people, or a number in a tribe traveling across the desert? I would say the latter.
I would say, what if...
Well, if you want to talk about, when does God count their people? Like Jeremiah something says, before you were even born, I knew you. He wouldn't know someone that's not a thing, right? So if he knows us before we're born, then are they counted as a person before they're born? How far before they're born?
Well, let's
Context
find
is our
out.
friend.
The Bible also addresses that. It says, if men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. If any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life. What that's saying is that if you beat up a girl and you kill her, then you're going to die too. But if all you do is kill the baby, then you got to make a deal with the dad. No big. In other words, the killing of the fruit is not life for life. That's just, pay a fine or something along those lines, make a deal with the dad, you owe him a little bit of money. But as far as, but if you kill the mom, which, that would be a life for a life. Then that guy has to die too. That shows you that he obviously does not consider the fetus to be as important as the woman.
I will say on the surface, that's not a horrible assumption to draw, but keep in mind, if we're talking about the law of Moses, the only way you can interpret this, per the people whose history and law this actually is the way the Talmud tells you to. So, if we're not familiar with what the Talmud says about this, we should find out. But the one thing you do know is it's never as simple as that. That's like the bullet point. So, just knowing enough about this from like the slavery and rape and things like this, I personally haven't looked into the woman and restitution for the killing the kid or whatever. And is it fair to say you haven't either?
Looked into the restitution for what?
Yeah, what you just said, the verse you cited. Have you looked into like the Talmud's official or what the Talmud's interpretation of this law is?
The Talmud's.
The Jewish book of law.
Oh, no, I haven't looked at the Torah to see what their interpretation of this is, or talked to a.
Well, no, not the Torah, the Talmud. It's like an encyclopedia set. It's like It's like a huge.
Sure. No, I understand, but no, I haven't talked to any.
Okay. What we should at some point, but Gab would be a good
Christianity
reference.
though.
Huh?
But that's different from Christianity, though, correct?
It is, but we're not talking about Christianity. We're talking about the law of Moses. So we really need, like, Gabriel, if you've met him, is a good resource. I would like to explore this, but we really need to withhold judgment because I haven't looked into it, and you haven't, and we're a bunch of white people trying to interpret 4,000-year-old Jewish law. But I do know from looking through enough of the Talmud that, I mean, it's like an encyclopedia set that would take up a full section over there in my bookcase. And so there's 613 like little bullet points, like a constitution, right? Like the pay 50 shekels of the rapist, the slaver, you can do this, put earrings through people's ears. These are the bullet points, but then they're exhaustively exasperated in a set of books that take up that shelf. So you can bet that whatever this is talking about is going to take up about that much explanation in the Talmud. So I'm certainly not trying to dodge the question, but if we're trying to be accurate, we really need to know what we're talking about. And neither of us do.
I think it's pretty common sense the verse isn't like, first of all, that is the entire context of the verse talking about the value of unborn fetuses. And then that is also very clear. I don't think we need, a lot of conjecture as far as how to interpret this because it's pretty clear. Even if some of it doesn't mean exactly what we think it means, the overall message behind it is that the woman is more valuable than the fetus. It's not a life for a life when it comes to a fetus. They're not counted as lives.
But see, we can't say that. But let me give you a parallel, something I do know something about because this comes up a lot. So the pay 50 shekels, the rapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You read it. You have the verses that you quoted earlier tonight. But in actuality, when you go to the Talmud, this is one of a plethora of things. For example, by the way, this, take my word for it. Call any synagogue, get a Talmud, fact check what I'm telling you. You don't be here 3 years in Google Plus without digging into this stuff. So anyways, like if someone forces himself and rapes a woman, they don't simply pay. The girl can say no. If the girl says no, there's severe punishments that happen. I think like a scourging or whipping and like all kinds of stuff can happen if the girl says no.
She's no longer clean. She's supposed to be murdered.
No. I'm saying this is the people whose law this is. This is what they will tell you. This is what they'll show you in the Talmud. So the girl can say no. It may, in the culture, it certainly may hinder her chances of getting a suitable mate. Yeah, that's about where it is. Anyway, so like she can certainly say no, and if she says no, then all kinds of crap can happen to the guy who did this. And if she does, for whatever reason, decide to say yes, then yeah, it kind of is as you say. But just to point out, there's a whole bunch of different stuff. Like it goes through court and hearings, and they get like the parents and families involved, and like anyway, it's a thing. It's a whole thing.
Would you agree that according to the Old Testament, there are times when rape is perfectly allowed?
Do you have an example you have in mind?
Maybe when you become so enamored with a lady on the battlefield.
Uh, I cannot recall anything at all ever that would make one think that rape is
Really?
cool.
You're kidding me, right? I mean, the Bible goes on. It even allows for sex slaves. I mean, let alone just rape. I mean,
Yeah, see that right there? That's another one that's just not so.
no. I mean, we're talking the full-blown sex slaves here. I'll give you a verse. Look it up. Exodus 21, chapter 21, verse 7 through 11. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she will
Exodus
not
what?
be... Exodus chapter 21, verses 7 through 11. I'm going to read them for you real quick. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she will not be freed at the end of the 6 years, as the men are. If she does not please the man who bought her, he may allow her to be bought back again. But he is not allowed to sell her to foreigners, since he is the one who broke the contract with her. And if the slave girl's owner arranged for her to marry his son, he may no longer treat her as a slave girl, but must treat her as a daughter. If he himself marries her and then takes another wife, he may not reduce her food or clothing or fail to sleep with her as his wife. If he fails in any of these three ways, the woman may be free without making any payment. I mean, that is a prescription for sex slaves. There's no way around that. There is no other definition for that.
I would be certainly scared trusting you with this law and a girl.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I'm reading in a few different things real quick.
Okay.
Being thorough.
Good, because this right here is positively disgusting. I mean, there's no way around this. This says you know.
Oh, well, I mean, there's always, the one thing you get from Jewish law, there is always ways around it. For example, if you don't want to be a slave, say you don't want to be a slave. Conversion is an easy one. Which, you may say, do I have to be dishonest and lie for the greater good? Well, that's exactly what you should say. So, maybe it's a little moral dilemma, but just saying, there's always a way out of this stuff. But yeah, and I'm trying to read this from my own perspective, but I know we've had this conversation before, and the Jewish response is absolutely, abhorrently not. That's disgusting. No, you're disgusting for mentioning that. So that's what a Jewish response will tell you, but I'm trying to read this on my own, so I can give maybe a thought-out response. Are you with me?
Oh yeah. I'm waiting for you to. Well, I'd like to go on to some, maybe 5 or 10 more prescriptions for rape.
We do have to wind this thing down pretty soon.
I mean, I'd just like your. I mean, we could move on to your next subject or anything we wanted to if we could just get your agreement that the Old Testament prescribes rape in many situations.
Of course not.
Or allows for. In fact.
Well, okay. For example. By the way, yeah, I just simply disagree. Like, if you want to take that and bend it, take it out. Yeah, I mean, I would truly be scared with you having.
I didn't bend that. He said when a man sells his daughter as a slave. It's the first line.
Is slave what's hanging you up?
No, not only that, but since you bought her as your slave, you may marry her. You may give her to your son. You may, to marry. You may do whatever you want with her.
No. You're putting your interpretation on top of an already interpreted thing.
That's what it says.
Let's
That's my interpretation.
That's exactly interpretation. It doesn't say give to marriage. Let's be accurate if we're going to be. Hang on.
It does. It says if she does not please the man who bought her, you may allow her to be bought up again. But if he is not.
And when it says pleased, are you just jumping to sexually pleased? Is that where we're going?
No.
Okay.
But if she don't, well, I would say by please, as in do what he tells her. Whether that be sex, whether that be clean the house, whether that be dig a ditch.
And so then if the Talmud says that's, like, again.
Of course, there is a caveat there. If you are going to fuck her, you're supposed to take her as one of your wives.
Where do you get the one of your wives?
Oh, it says at the end. It says if he marries her and then takes another wife, he may not reduce her food or clothing or fail to sleep with her as his wife. In other words, if he, gets this slave chick, marries her, now that's her wife. If he's to take on another wife, then he can't just disregard his old slave wife. He has to keep on screwing her too. And if he doesn't keep doing that, then she's free to go, and doesn't even have to pay to be free.
Let me screen share real quick, Mike.
Yeah, 7-11 right there. If he married, you had it up there. Oh man, you can't just tell me your interpretation.
No, I just read it.
Oh, what was your interpretation?
Now, you have to agree that being studious on this is good, right?
Yes, but
my interpretation is no, of course not. I'm just trying to find something other than you taking my word, which if you just want to take my word, I'm totally cool with.
You're supposed to be like, you know what? That is so fucked up that we can't trust my interpretation. We better go look somewhere else for somebody else that interpreted this differently, because you're like, there's no way I can interpret this on my own and come to a reasonable conclusion on how this couldn't prescribe rape.
Well, I clearly can't spell Exodus, so that should make you happy. No, I'm not trying to interpret it. I'm trying to go to the Hebrew.
Yeah, I want your interpretation of it, though. That would be the best, I think.
I gave you my interpretation. Have a slave. Don't have sex with them. That would be adultery. And then if you want to say, well, you can marry them, well, does she agree? If not, that's against the law of Moses. If she does, well, then she's agreed.
Really? That's against the law of Moses?
Oh, come on, Tim. How many times have you brought up if you're an adulterer, you should stone people? Does that mean you should kill people who are not married and have sex?
The Bible perfectly allows for concubines. There is a difference between adultery and having multiple wives. There's a big difference.
I think the observant Jew would disagree with you.
Maybe a Jew, but any, decent scholar of the Old Testament would understand that.
You see the problem here. Like, whenever you have a source about Christianity, I would say, go to the people, go to the Greek, go to these things. Whenever you have a question about the law or the Torah, go to the people whose history and law this actually is. That doesn't mean Bart Ehrman for the New Testament, nor does it mean some other English white American scholar for the Old Testament. Not saying that, they can't do a decent job, but you should certainly want to be as, I would think, authentic as you can. So why would you not go to the people whose history this stuff actually is? That has to make sense, right?
For the same reason you think that you should live like Jesus, but yet you're not a Jew.
That's a non sequitur.
Why? Because Jesus was a Jew, so if he was going to live like Jesus, he would be a Jew. But yet you don't do that, so why would you trust the Jews as far as your interpretation of the Old Testament?
Because it's their history, it's their law. Like, this stuff has nothing to do with my own theism. This is a law of Moses and a religion that I'm not a part of.
This has nothing to do with your God?
Where am I losing you?
Yeah, you're losing me when you're saying that this has nothing to do with your God. Like, this isn't Yahweh.
This has nothing to do with my theology.
It should be at least a deterrent. I mean, you better stay away from the Old Testament, right? Is that what you're saying? The Old Testament doesn't count? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I think there's certainly some wisdom to be derived there. I believe, in all the scripture you can use for practical application or good moral lessons or whatever in your life. But when it comes to the laws that were specifically given to the Jewish people, then no, that does not apply to me. I'm not Jewish. These laws are not for me, nor are these laws for anyone, post Jesus on the cross, for anyone who believes in him and trusts him.
But he did say in Matthew chapter 5, verses 18 through 19, "For truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass until all the law is accomplished. Whoever then relaxes one of the least of these commandments," and it's talking about the 613 Levitical laws, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least into the kingdom of heaven.
And then in Luke 24, he talks about how he came and all the stuff had to happen. He had to die. and rise again so he could fulfill the law. So no one's saying the law is just, he's like, scrap it.
No, you're talking about something completely different. When he was talking about fulfilling the law, he's talking about fulfilling the law of the prophecy of the blood oath. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with it, but he's talking, the part where he says not one jot or tittle of the law will be done away with. That thing, that's what we're talking about.
It says that in multiple places in the Bible. There's not just one. But the verse that I just talked about clearly says that none of it is going to be gone until all is accomplished. And if you haven't noticed, there are still things being accomplished.
Like what?
I read a book earlier. I accomplished that. I mowed the grass. I mean, there's still things being accomplished all the time. That's very clear that not everything has passed. Now, let's go to Luke, chapter 16, verse 17. It says, "It is easier for heaven and earth to pass away."
Whoa, dude, you're getting away. I'm still trying to read this thing.
Oh yeah, this is the same. These are all from the.
No. The servant thing. Reading backwards in Hebrew and talking to you is just about at the limit of my multitasking skills. So if you want to table this, we can, or we can finish exploring this one.
Oh yeah, we are still exploring. I was just furthering my case. But go ahead.
We can keep talking, just don't lead down any more questionable paths.
Well, no, I'm going to stay on this same path. I'd like to read you a few verses that, to me, say that you, and not just me, but the majority of Christians agree that the Old Testament laws are valid to them. I mean, you can tell that obviously by the whole anti-gay thing. Jesus never said that about being gay, right?
Yeah, hold on. I'm almost done. Seriously, you should look at my screen share, and you should try reading this stuff in reverse with me. It's a challenge. Okay, so there's absolutely nothing. Let's read in the Hebrew. So this is the best our English can translate, the direct Hebrew. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever you should think this is a sex slaves or gives permission, besides what I've said already. But hold on. Well, let's not conjecture. Let's actually read the text that's right here. So then it says if he has betrothed her to his son, so that's the first hint that anything sexual could potentially come about. And that's, typically betrothments lasted over a year. And she would have to say yes. Otherwise,
keep in mind she's a slave.
Right. It doesn't matter. Still, they can't violate laws. So she
Where
must.
Does it say she has to be? Where does it say that she has to say yes?
This is stuff you will find in the Talmud, and I don't. Yeah. But let's see. What was I saying? Anyway, yeah. So if she doesn't say yes, one thing in the Talmud, kidnapping is completely forbidden. So, I believe that's what's equated to if you want to try to impose like sex slavery, that would certainly be kidnapping, and that's also like any other slave. Like when people say slavery and they think like bringing people from Africa to America in the 1800s, that was kidnapping. So by the Jewish law that we're talking about now, that could not happen. That is absolutely forbidden.
I think the Christian version of slavery seems to be, if not, first of all, the entire slavery that you were talking about was based on the Bible, but also if you read about some of the shit that they do to the slaves, come on, man, this stuff is worse. You've read how it says to treat your slaves. That you can beat them all you want, but and as long as they live, that's fine. But if they die, then you should be punished. But as long as they live for a few days after you beat them, then hey, it's
okay. Well, hang on. Okay, I actually do know a thing or two about that. So let me get there. So, anyways, to recap this real quick.
I want to stay on sex slaves. Don't jump to that. I was just saying that there is prescriptions for how to handle slaves.
Oh no, we're done with sex slaves. I just want to recap this now that I've actually. By the way, I don't know. Well, hold on. Well. I would say, just wanted to point out, I don't know is a fine answer, but if you have the time and diligence, this is good stuff, even if it takes a long time, so I apologize I took a while, but if you go to the original Hebrew, the language this stuff was written in, granted, I don't speak or read Hebrew, we just have this English interpretation, or translation, but still, from reading the original language, there's no reason to think any way, shape, or form sex slavery is cool. That's my answer, and you can read it here. So if
Okay.
anyone's watching the screen share, here it is. If you get sex slavery out of this, you and Tim will be the only ones. Okay, but now, so
I just pasted another verse, and if you don't get anything but sex slavery from that, then
oh goodness,
you're not reading it properly as far as.
you're killing me, Smalls.
No, this is very important. It says, "When you go out to war against your enemies and the Lord, and your God delivers them into your hand that you take captives, if you see a comely woman among the captives and become so enamored of her that you wish to have her as a wife, you may take her home to your house. But before she may live there, she must shave her head and pare her nails and lay aside her captive's garb. After she has mourned her father and mother for a full month, you may have relations with her. And you shall be her husband, and she shall be your wife. However, if later on you lose your liking for her, you shall give her her freedom if she wishes it. But you shall not sell her or slave her, since she was married to you under compulsion." Under compulsion. You understand what that means? She was forced to marry you. This was not an option. That's why it supposedly says that you're not allowed to sell her, is because you forced her to do this. You became so enamored with her you got your captives. You see one you like, you can grab her up, take her to your house, cut off all her hair, cut off all her nails, get rid of her clothes, wait a month, and she's yours. How is that anything except for forcible rape?
Are you reading my screen share?
Well, it wasn't, but I am now.
When you go forth to war against your enemies, and the Lord has delivered to them into your hands, you have taken to see a woman among the captives, and beautiful, and have a desire in you would have to your wife to her, then you shall bring more song about her, shave her head, and pare her nails, shall put garments from her captives, shall remain in your house, and mourn her father. A month after that you shall go, be your husband unto you, shall be your wife unto you, and it shall be not, if do, and you shall, and it shall be not, if in... Come on, Tim, give me your interpretation of this. This isn't sounding like what you said.
It says you have humbled that upon in do make merchandise not for money. I mean, your translation here isn't very clear, is it? It's definitely not being. I mean, it's definitely not very clear.
This is putting English on top of direct Hebrew. It's not supposed to be clear. It's supposed to be the closest we can get to the Hebrew meaning. But yeah, so the short answer, if she doesn't want to be your slave, and if she doesn't want to be your wife, don't. Again, the quickest thing, huh?
Where did it say that?
This is Talmud law.
What? No, it clearly says that if you like her, you take her to your house, you shave her nails, you cut off her hair, and you take off her clothes, and she's yours. And this was under compulsion. So therefore, since you made her do this, you can't sell her as a slave. There is no more clear. It can't be more clear than that.
It can be.
And Christians don't go by the Talmud. We're talking about Christianity. We're talking about Christians. They don't go by that. They go by what the Bible said, the King James Version.
You've got to focus fire. Do you want to talk about Christianity that has nothing to do with these laws, or do you want to talk about Judaism, which has nothing to do with me, and we can talk about these laws that is not my religion? I'm okay doing either one, but what we can't do is mix both of them that are very distinct. So, I tried
to skip past this just to show you first that that Jesus clearly indicates that you should be going by this law.
No, you shouldn't. If you've read the Bible, I'm starting to question this. If you truly read the Bible as much as you have, you'll know through the entire New Testament, it talks about the tablets of stone, the law, how it dies away, and how the only thing you do is believe Christ was crucified and trust in Him. That is it. The entire New Testament's full of this.
But
So,
I say the exact opposite because I've read the entire New Testament multiple times, and what I read in the New
well,
Testament,
if you have trouble interpreting the New Testament that says it so clearly so
I'm
much, you
interpreting
certainly have trouble Huh?
I'm interpreting it wrong. Okay, except for there's like 90% of Christian, or I don't know 90%, but like
Well, let me screen share again real quick.
how many Christians are against gay people? You know,
Oh
come on.
yeah, I'll talk till I'm blue in the face about that. I mean,
Okay, are you,
whenever, what reason I believe what I believe is I believe it is the most accurate. So if I find I'm not on the side like there's plenty of Christians who are like you're supposed to be a Christian. Why aren't you on my side? Because I think you're wrong in this particular subject matter. Like I don't care what side I'm supposed to be on. I want to be on the side of right. So if that's you, Tim, fine. Even though that's a rare occasion. If that's other Christians, then fine. I don't care who I oppose. I believe what I believe because I believe it's the most accurate. So I would hope that's a common thread. I hope everyone's like that.
so if we go to Mark chapter 7, verse 9 through 13, where the words in red by Jesus says, "Whoever curses father or mother shall die." That wasn't for you.
Where are you? I'm looking at something else.
Mark chapter 7, verse 9 through 13. Where Jesus criticizes the Jews for not killing their disobedient children according to the Old Testament law.
What is it? Mark 7?
Yeah,
And what?
9 through 13. Oh no,
Okay.
Mark 7 through 10. Chapter
7
7.
through 10?
No, chapter 7, verse 10.
Okay.
Whoever curses father or mother shall die. The two before that, or no, from before that and after that, Mark 7, 9 through 13 is where he's basically criticizing the Jews for not killing their disobedient children.
Okay, so let's see. Little context. Da, 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 da. So for the Pharisees and all the Jews, do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they don't eat unless they wash. There are many other traditions they observe, such as washing cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. And the Pharisees and scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" And he said to them, "Well, did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, the people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." Jewish law. Interesting. You just made a case for Christianity, Tim. Anyways, hang on. You leave the commandment of God and hold to the tradition of men. That's awesome. You've just pointed out something awesome to me. Anyways, and hold on, I'll explain in a minute. And then he said, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your own tradition." Moses
That's
said,
what Christianity is right there. It's a
okay, hold on.
way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition.
No, hold on. For Moses said, "Honor your father and mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die."
Right
But
there.
you say, hold on. But you say, if a man tells his mother or father, if a man tells his father or mother, "Whatever you would have gained from me is whatever that is given to God," then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father and mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition that you've handed down, such as many things you do. Okay, first, the reason this stuck out to me is because Christianity specifically believes that you do not follow these 613 laws. You're not a Jewish person. You were never under these laws. And even for those who are Jewish and are under these laws, if you believe in Christ, his death and resurrection, you are not under these laws. So the reason I chuckled is because Jesus points out the same thing here. So he talks about the tradition of men. And by the way, just to address your actual question first, hang on, let me get my screen share off. So in the Talmud, it says, right, if a kid disrespects his father or mother or whatever, then drag him to the gate and stone him to death. And you're like, why don't people do that? Why don't people stone their kids? First of all, if they're not Jewish, that's why. Second of all, if you go to the Talmud, which is the interpretation, the only way you can interpret this, it talks, by the way, the Bible right there talks about, it's not a little innocent Johnny that says, "I don't want to eat my vegetables." It talks about, a guy who's like doing every horrible thing he can to his parents.
Curseth.
No. Like every horrible thing, like running their name into the ground, completely screwing. Read the Bible. Completely screwing his family over, and has no inclination of wanting to change or stop putting his family in this. But the Talmud, the only way you can interpret this stuff, has a whole like list of stuff that goes with this, like
This
legal
is New
proceedings.
Testament.
Huh?
This is New Testament.
But it's referring the Old Testament law. Hold on. Do you want me to answer this?
Yes, you keep going.
This is one of these things I actually have looked into. That's why I'm so happy you picked it. Anyway, so there's like this whole list of like legal proceedings. They must be warned. They must be told by elders. All this other stuff. Basically, this kid has to be like giving everyone the finger and daring them to kill him before anything like this would be considered. That's the actual way you interpret this from the Talmud. It is nearly impossible to die under these laws. Like, by the way, to get some of them out quickly. Like, you know, if you walk in and see someone like sacrificing something to a false god, or if you see people in adultery, or if you see any of these things that carry the weight of death penalty or stoning or capital punishment, there's a general rule that applies to all these. First, it has to be like several people that see, like more than 2 or more people that see them. They can't just run away and tell someone. They have to go to the person in the middle of them doing whatever the act or crime is, tell them, hey, stop doing this now, and if the person stops, then they go away. If the person's like, F you, I'm going to do this anyway, then they go tell the elders or leaders or whatever, and then they come to them, and they have this huge drawn-out legal proceeding. So that's the actual way to look at this stuff, and it's certainly not trying to dodge or cleverly interpret. Like, honestly, if I believed, you know, this was a command of God, and he said, hey, kill a baby once a day.
Okay, so Jesus is saying that
Well, hang on.
you're supposed to follow that, no matter how you interpret that law, Jesus is saying that you should follow it.
Right, he's talking to Jewish people who are under this law. Are you with me?
Yes.
So if the Jewish people who are under this law really follow it, they'll be doing everything I just said that's in the Talmud. I don't know why I keep pointing back there, but that's everything that's in the Talmud. So if it says you have to tell your kid to stop being a jerk, and then you follow these legal proceedings, they really need to do that. Versus the alternative is, hey, don't do that. F you, parents. Well, what are we going to do? We raised him this way, da-da-da. He's saying do something. Follow the law and, you know, maybe discipline the little punk.
But when asked.
Like, there's really, huh?
But when asked, Jesus said, when asked what they're supposed to do, Jesus said, did Moses give you the law, and yet none of you keepeth it? For the law was given by Moses.
Okay. What's your question specifically?
I'm saying that it is clear that Jesus believed that the Old Testament should be followed. And he was very clear about this. He said his own, in words in red, the scripture, talking about the Old Testament, cannot be broken. Can't. It does not go away. It is with us. That is how people are supposed to live. Jesus himself, lived by the Old Testament laws and believed them and prescribed others to live by the Old Testament laws. But yet you're saying somewhere it says that you don't have to. And of course you didn't point out anywhere where it says that.
Well, I could point them out all day long. Like if we're talking about the New Testament, this is great. This is getting into what I actually believe. But so are you satisfied with what I've said thus far, though? Like, just provisionally, are you good with taking my word until you can fact check what I've said about the Talmud and all this stuff? If we're good, we can move on.
Forget the Talmud, because that's the translation of the laws, and I'm not saying that your translation's wrong. I'm saying that Jesus said you have to follow.
Okay, we'll move on. So you know the Old Testament, New Testament, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you know New Testament means covenant, right? New covenant.
Do you think we should give a shout out to the Nicene Council? Thank you for the Bibles.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So you know New Testament means new covenant, right?
Sure. No, it's a New Testament. It's a testimony.
It means covenant. Anyway, so the only way you get a new covenant is if there's not an old covenant. So the only way there's not an old covenant is if it's completed, if it's done, if it's over. So keep in mind that we believe the new covenant starts when Jesus actually dies. So all the Gospels up until Jesus dying on the cross, this is still under Old Covenant. So just because it tricks people when they open right before Matthew and it says New Testament, that's not really the New Testament yet. The New Covenant doesn't begin, the New Testament doesn't begin until Jesus dies. So you have, again, context is our friend. We must separate these things. So half of the time Jesus is talking, look who he's talking to. His audience is almost exclusively Jewish people who are waiting for a Messiah, who are under the law of Moses that Jesus is referring. Like the rich young ruler. For example, when he says, what do I have to do to be saved? Or what do I have to do to have eternal life? And Jesus says, sell all your crap and follow me. Why did he say that? It was very specific to this guy's case, who is Jewish, who is under the law, and apparently he had kept everything else. So Jesus saw one more thing he needs to do to be cool under this law, sell all this crap and follow him. Another time is like this, when he's talking to Jewish people and talking about their laws. And another one's like when he's talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees, and he says, not only do you not, he's chastising them for dumbing down the laws, because there's 613. And he says, look, you've reduced the laws down to like 10 commandments, the 10 commandments. He's like, so you're not even holding people to the law. You're saying just keep these 10, and that's good enough. So almost all the time, Jesus is battling with these religious rulers and Pharisees who are Jewish, who are under the law. He's trying to elevate the law and say, look, you have this law. You're held to this standard. You can't just boil it down and keep that law and be cool. You have to keep every single one of these laws. And then the other part of the time, he's talking about new covenant stuff. Like John 3 says it 4 times in 3 verses. I'll finish now. He says, God loved the world, that everyone who believes in him will live forever. The world's not judged because of anything they've done. It's because they didn't believe in him. If you believe in him, you will live forever. So you get this part that you have to divide this up. If he's talking to the Jewish people under the law, or if he's talking about people saying he's going to die and to trust him and believe him. Does that make sense? You may not agree or whatever, but does what I'm saying at least make sense and you can fact check away?
I mean, you're basically saying that Jesus was only talking to Jews?
No, not only, but pretty much exclusively. Like, in his disciples, you really get this whole new message, and where he says, he's the bread of life and stuff that freaked people out, right? Because they didn't get it. They thought they, wanted him to eat his flesh. And he's like, look, I'm the life. If you believe in me, you will never die. And he says in John 8:31, to the people who believed in him, believed his claims, if you remain faithful to his teachings, you're truly his disciples. And his teachings aren't like a Sermon on the Mount, like Matthew 5 or whatever. Like, basically be a good humanitarian are his teachings, with this belief in he is the Son of God. So this is what he teaches. Self-sacrifice, love God, love people. He says these are the greatest commands. He says all the 613 laws, all of these, all the prophets, all the Psalms, everything are fulfilled in these things. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. He says everything is summed up in these 2 things. So does that make sense now? You just have to keep it separate. Or, it confuses Christians too. Not saying I have a perfect message, or I have a perfect interpretation, just saying that this is what the text actually says, this is the narrative you actually get if you read the thing all the way through. And you're like, why is this? And then, whenever it clicks and you're like, oh, the New Testament, the New Covenant doesn't really begin until Jesus dies. That's when it begins. So everything up into that is Old Testament stuff.
I thought Jesus was alive.
Right, but his death is what fulfills the Old Covenant and starts the New Covenant.
He didn't really die. He was just temporarily inconvenienced, right?
If by temporarily inconvenienced you mean physically departed, then yes.
I mean, I can tell you one thing. All the people I know that die, that's a big difference between how Jesus supposedly died. Big difference.
How so?
One of them gets to keep on going and comes back with superpowers.
Well, I suppose if you believe in him, then you'll be doing the same thing.
You think I would come back with superpowers?
Define superpowers.
Can fly?
Some other dimensional spirit body thing?
No, he flew. He came back in a physical form and then flew away in front of everybody.
Well, I suppose if you're not limited by laws of this natural world, why not? I think we're getting a little off base, though.
Because with great power comes great responsibility?
Should have Jesus for Spider-Man 2 would have made it a lot better. But does that make sense, Tim? Tim, does it? If you haven't thought about it that way before, does that sort of make sense? Like, you need to keep in mind the audience. The New Testament doesn't really begin until Jesus dies. That's when it begins.
That's when it begins. The New Testament is talking about his life. At least Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. So how could that be talking about what happens after he dies?
What?
They're talking about his life and what he said to many people, not just the Jews, but also to his own people. His
own people were the Jews.
No, his disciples, which of course were also Jewish, but were considered. I mean, do you not consider the disciples as the first Christians?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, he told them He told them that, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets.
Right.
And he's talking about the Old Testament law to the very first Christians.
It's not the Old Testament law to the very first Christians.
Huh? No. Well, you just said that the disciples were the first Christians.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. He hasn't come to abolish the law. Where's that actual verse? Let's go to the verse.
Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Do you not know your Bible?
I don't have an index in the top of my head for a conversation with Tim.
Oh, okay.
I mean, as perfect as I am,
It'd be useful if you did.
Where'd you say it was? Matthew 5 what?
17. I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill
Tim, you don't know your Bible either. It's not... Oh.
I hope so. Amen, I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest part or the smallest letter of the law, until all things have taken place. All things, not just some things or just one death or any of that sort of thing. It's all things. And he's talking to his disciples. He's very clear about this. You are to follow the all.
Keep reading.
Go ahead.
Read down to 18. Well, he says, don't think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to what?
Fulfill.
Okay.
What do you think the word fulfill means?
So if he fulfills them...
What, that means he executes them?
Yeah.
Okay, he's there to...
He's there to complete the law, to fulfill the law.
Make sure that the law is followed.
So if it's fulfilled, maybe fulfilled is the word we're tripped up on. If something is fulfilled, that doesn't mean it's ongoing. It means it's done. It's been completed. It's been fulfilled. So if it's fulfilled, then there is no more law.
But
right?
No, the sentence before that says he didn't come to abolish it. He did not come to end it. He did not come to, by your definition of fulfilled, he didn't come to do that. He came to justify, and that's what he meant by fulfill, is to justify the law, to further develop one's ability.
Okay, so let me give you Nate's translation real quick. This is the way I believe is most accurate. Let me translate it for you. Nate's translation. Don't think I've come to say, hey, don't worry about the law anymore. But I've come to complete the law, so you don't have to worry about the law anymore.
What? You don't have to worry about the law no more, but don't worry, I'm going to make it to where you don't have to worry about the law anymore. That doesn't make any sense.
No, there's a difference. I don't know why we're having so much trouble unless we want to. So don't think I've come to abolish, which means get rid of the law. So don't think he's come to say, hey, don't worry about that law, just forget it all, scrap it, it was a bad idea, don't worry about it. He didn't come to do that. He came to say, here's the law, I'm staring at it, so I'm going to go ahead and complete this thing and finish it.
In your professional opinion, why do you think you're in such a minority on this?
I'm not at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where does it say in the New Testament that you should oppress gay people? Where does Jesus talk about gay people?
It has nothing to do with gay people.
Where does no. Where does Jesus talk about gay people? Does he say anything about them?
No.
And does the Old Testament law say anything about what we should do to gay people?
If you're Jewish, so no, it doesn't say anything about what you should do.
Right, Jews don't, right, according to you, but it says what some people. I'm not talking about who, but
okay. So I'll give you. I'll be on Team Tim for a second.
No, my point is that the people who actively hate gay people are following the Old Testament.
Okay, so Tim.
Furthermore, the majority of Christians actively hate on gay people.
So Tim, the same way I believe that Christians who try to follow this law are severely wrong is the same way that I believe what you're doing now is severely wrong. Again, it doesn't mean I think I have a perfect interpretation, but I think, I'm certainly in the majority. If you have a reading comprehension and you honestly read the book from start to finish, you'll be like, I get this makes sense. But it's fringe people who are like, I don't know even the most hardcore Christian who will be like, I hate gay people. You may certainly get that from their actions and their speech, which sucks and gross, but I don't think even they'll admit to that. So let's be fair to them, even though maybe they don't deserve it. But I think a more actual position will be, we think homosexuality is wrong because the Bible says it's a sin. And they get this from New Testament stuff, but then they can also make Old Testament references, which are Jewish people, which has nothing to do with them. So I think they're wrong in the same way that I think you're wrong about this, Jesus, you must follow the law forever. It's just simply, I mean, if we have 20 people read that passage, I think 18 of them will come out with what I'm saying, and maybe one or two will come out with what you or the other people are saying.
Which passage was that? The one with the "Thou shalt not," that I've not came to abolish the law. That one?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, do you know what abolish means?
It means get rid of it.
He didn't come to do that.
Right.
You said he did come to end it. You said to fulfill means to end it.
No, Tim. What's hard
Why
here?
would you say I did not come to end the law? I came to end the law.
If you want to say it that way, it sounds confusing.
That's not what he's saying.
But
He's talking about fulfilling. He's talking about fulfilling the blood oath, where you don't have to sacrifice lambs anymore. I'll be your human sacrifice. That's what he's talking about. Fulfill. He came to fulfill the promise by Isaiah that if you slit a lamb's throat and let the blood run down the dirt, that your sins will be washed away by the blood of the lamb. That's what he's coming to. That's the law he's talking about fulfilling, not the laws of the Old Testament.
Then you're the only.
I'm surprised you don't know about this.
Huh?
I'm surprised you don't know about this.
I understand what you're saying. I just can't disagree more. You're the only person I've ever heard try to make that case. So, like in Acts 15, for example, this is really okay. Like in Acts 15, like they specifically hold a council meeting for this, right? And they say, if we know Christ crucified and trust in Him is all that you need to do, then what do we tell these people who are trying to say you must still follow the law of Moses? Because there were people who, you may have been one of them back then, who were going around saying, hey, Christ dying, that's great. The blood oath, if you want to equate it to that. That's great, but you still have to be circumcised. You still have to follow the law of Moses. And the whole New Testament church, the disciples of Jesus, right, and Paul and these other guys are saying, no, that's not it. You're not under the law. You're under Christ. Like, if you trust Him, that's all you do. Follow Christ. And they say, so what do we tell these new people, and the Greeks and the Gentiles and things like this? They say, abstain from sexual immorality and don't drink blood of a strangled or animal offered to idols or something. There's like 3 things. So if you have 613 laws for Jewish people, and they're trying to agree on what to tell the new converts, and the consensus for the entire New Testament first century church is watch out for sexual immorality, and don't drink the blood of animals strangled and stuff offered to idols. So there's just no way you can make the case you're making and keep in any accuracy with the text. You just can't.
I see the exact opposite. I don't see how you can make the case that he's saying, I did not come to abolish the law, instead I came to abolish the law.
So is it a redundant sentence? Don't you see a difference between let the law, let this thing run its course, and then end it at the finish line, versus abolish, meaning the law is running its course, and you're like, here's the finish line, nope, don't worry about that, just stop where you are. You see the difference, right? One is cutting it off short and not ending it in that sense. It's just cutting it off. It's like stop. And the other one is let the law run its course and then finish it and put a bow on top of it.
Let the law run its course and then put a... I mean, are the fulfillment of the prophecy is what he's talking about when he's talking about fulfilling the law. He's talking about fulfilling the prophecy of Isaiah. That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about fulfilling the Old Testament law.
So I have come to abolish the law. I have not come to abolish the law or the prophets.
Either one of them, yeah.
Okay, so does he specifically mention the blood covenant? Because it sounds like that and the law and the prophets are included in abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them.
Right, but to fulfill the covenant.
So when he says, I've not come to abolish the law or the prophets, all you get from that is blood oath from Isaiah.
Well, that's what he's talking about when he's talking about fulfilling the prophecies, when he's talking about fulfilling what the prophet said. Do not think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. He's not, and he's not came to abolish, but to fulfill the prophecies that were made by the prophets, and specifically the self-fulfilling prophecy of Isaiah.
Well, you can't separate the law from the prophets. It's like, you get the end from the beginning. Like in Genesis 3, right? Like before there was any of this law, there was Abraham. And it talks about how Abraham didn't have a law. He just had faith in God, and he was cool with God because he had faith. And God tells him. So it's not like he just thought at one point this would be a good idea to have laws and then do away with them. He tells the end from the beginning. In Genesis 3:15, I think he starts, and he says, look, your people are going to be in slavery for 400 years in Egypt, and then they're going to get the law, and I'm paraphrasing, and then you're going to get a law, and then you're going to be under something for a while, and then there's going to be a Messiah come. So in Genesis 3, there is no law when he's talking about Abraham and talking about a new covenant he's going to make with him. And then you get 400 years of slavery in Egypt with Moses and all of them, and then you get the law. And now the law is running its course, and now the next thing they're waiting for is the Messiah. So Jesus shows up, he claims to be the Messiah, and then he tells them he's not came to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill all of them, to complete all of them. All the law that says do this, don't do this, whatever.
No. He's coming to fulfill the prophecy, not the law.
Timmy, I don't think anyone's going to be on your side on this. Like, regardless of your belief or lack of.
The majority of Christians who say that they don't believe that or think that it's never okay to kill, or it's never okay to murder, however they interpret it, or that it's never okay to steal, or if it's never okay to do all these things that are in the 613 Levitical laws, the majority of Christians still think that it's not okay to be gay, not okay to dozens and dozens of things that Christians every day fight. One of the things is like
but you just read it earlier. Jesus says if you don't keep every single law, if you break one little one of these 613 laws to the Jewish audience, if you break one, you're guilty of breaking all 613. So you can't say that some Christians are cool with some of the commandments, like the 10 Commandments, but not the other ones, like the ceremonial law of the Jews. If they break one law, they're guilty of it all. So when Jesus fulfills this law, you're not required to keep any. That doesn't mean go lie, cheat, and steal and murder. You don't want to do those because you're not a slug. You're a good moral person. That's why you don't lie, cheat, and steal. It's not because you have some law hanging over your head that tells you not to murder and lie. You just don't murder and lie because it's a bad thing to do.
So the 10 Commandments are no longer valid.
No, you get this from the New Testament. Again, the 10 Commandments say don't lie, don't cheat, or don't steal, don't murder.
He only mentions 4 of the 10 Commandments. Jesus only mentions 4 of the 10 Commandments when he's talking about rules and laws. The rest of the 613, nothing.
Well, he mentioned earlier, you quoted him, when he says, if you break one of these, you're guilty of the whole thing.
I'm talking, okay, out of the 10 Commandments, he only mentions...
The 10 Commandments are part of the 613.
Absolutely, but he only mentions 4 of those 10.
So what?
Do the rest of those are not valid because he didn't mention them?
Of course not. He already told us. Unless he's...
So then why shouldn't you still go stone gay people?
Again, I'm not Jewish, and Jesus fulfilled all these laws.
No, he fulfilled the prophecy that a Savior was coming back.
It says it 2 words away. How do you... It's one sentence, Tim. It says law or prophets. You can't just omit law and say prophets.
He says right after that, the very next sentence, Amen, I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away. Not the smallest part of the smallest letter of the law will change until all things have taken place. There are still things taking place.
I understand that. The reason
Earth has not passed away.
I understand that. The reason we believe this law is in effect, look at it as like an opt-in. Like, if you go to an email or a website or something, you know how you have to double opt-in for emails? It's not even that difficult. It's like binary. It's a single opt-in. So if you believe Jesus fulfilled these laws in his life and his death and his resurrection, and you opt in and you're like, I believe that, I'm cool with Jesus. I trust you. Save me. Then great. His fulfillment, count yourself in. You're not held to this law. If you don't, you're like, no, I don't want to be on Team Jesus. I'm not in. Then you're still judged by this law. So the whole point of Christian theism is if you believe in Christ, you're not under the law. It says you're under the law of the Spirit. So it makes a distinction. It says you're not under the law of the stone or the law of the tablets, which is the Ten Commandments, and all the other laws. It says you're led by the Spirit. You're under the law of the Spirit. That's it. So if you're like Team Jesus, yes, he fulfilled these laws. They're done. If I trust him, I'm good. If you're not someone that does that, then you're held to all this other stuff. By the way, if you're not Jewish, you're held to like 6 commandments. It's like don't be to be cool with God in Judaism. That was a little extra. I don't remember what it is, but it's something in Judaism. But anyway, so that's the whole point of Christian theism.
6 being that you have to kill your child who curseth their parents?
I don't know why you're so hung up on that. No.
It's one of the Old Testament laws that Jesus is saying that you should follow.
I just wonder if you could picture yourself back then.
Okay.
If you would have saw a kid like back-talking his parents, would you have been like running around asking why they're not like stoning them? And if the parents say, because we're going by the oral tradition at the time, the Talmud wasn't written, but if they're like, we're going by oral tradition that says we must do this and we must do this and we're following the law, would you like pick up stones and start throwing them at their kid? Like, that's just not how they did things.
I mean, it's very similar. They actually said that if you need some help, you can go get your neighbors and drag him to the center of town and tie him to a stake and stone him.
And if
because a young buck like that can be rambunctious, you know.
Again, we're not talking about 6-year-old Johnny. Like it talks about.
Yeah, I know. We're talking about
being a drunkard and all this other stuff.
16,
I don't know too many
17, getting drunk, cursing his parents. Right. You might need help taking him down, so you're supposed to gather up the town, and you guys can all go help. Get some help on killing your kid.
And if you do that without following the law, which is all these other steps you must take, then you're violating the law and you've just broken it.
So how does I still don't understand how you're saying that law doesn't apply to you? He says it to his disciples.
Well, Tim, as an atheist,
are you not a disciple?
Yeah, I do consider myself a follower of Christ. So, Tim, as an atheist, if somehow there is absolute truth and it's this God of the Bible, and we realize this one day, and you're right about this and I'm not, then I'll be completely shocked, but okay. But honestly, as honest and candid as I can possibly be, and you should ask around, this is kind of a thing in Christianity. You believe Jesus died, fulfilling the law, new covenant starts.
No, there's plenty of Christians that do believe that. I'm saying that the majority of them disagree with you. The majority of them think that the Old Testament is valid.
Well, I don't think the Old Testament is invalid, but qualify valid. Like, should you take laws?
If it doesn't apply to you, then it's no longer valid.
No. Should you take laws that were never, ever given for non-Jewish people and apply them to you? That's not only ill-advised, that's wrong, and that's stupid, and that's dangerous. But if you find something in Proverbs or Psalms, is it valid? Like, I totally believe you can get good stuff out of this, but you need to appropriate it appropriately. So, that's like if you take the Ten Commandments, Tim, and you take out do not, you've just made the Bible tell you to murder. That doesn't mean that's what the Bible says. It means you've done something dangerous and stupid and wrong. Yeah. So we need to be as accurate as possible. But this doesn't
really say do not murder. It says do not murder thy fellow Jew. Let's be serious. You can look at your Talmud for that if you need to. It does. Murdering other people is not against the Old Testament God or Jesus himself. Nobody thinks you should let a Mennonite live. Not Jesus, not nobody. I mean, if you come across one of those guys, these kill them on sight.
Well, I guess all murder is killing, not all killing is murder. Who decides that? Does Mike make right? I don't know. That's a different conversation.
Right, absolutely. But
or is it true? Or is it truly justified? Like
I'm just saying, murder is what it says, right? It's not just kill, because it's not saying you should never kill.
Yeah, it's saying don't unjustly kill something. That's murder.
Don't unjustly kill someone.
Huh?
But it doesn't say that. It says don't unjustly kill thy neighbor Jew.
Where does it say that? What Ten Commandments are you reading?
Talmud out. Look at the Ten Commandments in the Talmud. The full translation says thy neighbor Jew. You don't see that in too many translations. Not but in the original translations, in most
Well,
reasonably
I've screen
sought
shared.
out translations.
Well, I've screen shared my stuff. Can you reciprocate? Can you screen share whatever
Sure.
you're talking about?
Let me just.
But anyways, like this is not where, at least in Christian theology, this is not where we typically get hung up. Like usually you'll meet a Christian pretty much exclusively because this is what the New Testament is full of. After Jesus' death, there's a challenge. If you're bored and want some reading, just fall asleep to. Start reading after Jesus dies and see the overwhelming consensus you get. So in Christianity, this is not something we easily mess up. I've actually never met anyone. I mean, I've met people that say, well, we need to live by the Ten Commandments, and not all of them, but the 10, that's a good one. And that's usually where disagreements begin. So as far as following the 613 laws, I've never met anybody. Well, okay, I take that back. I've met a handful of people who believe that way, but not even enough to give that weight.
Okay, you wanted me to. What was it you wanted me to show you? Oh yeah,
The Ten Commandments in the original language.
Kill.
We're not going to like evilbible.com, are we?
No, thy neighbor Jew. Let's see what it says.
We really need to wrap this up too, though. It's way late.
Wikipedia, is that a very sound source for you?
Well, it's not the Talmud. Let's see what it says.
Okay, let's search for the word neighbor. La 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 la. 9 of 10, huh? Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Hosea 13:21.
Thou shalt not kill. That one didn't even say murder.
Yeah, that's not a translation. Hold on. That thou shalt not kill whom? See what it says here. This guy's quack, I bet. I'd be a little leery. Look at that guy. He looks kind of funny. Kill thy neighbor. The Compton Christian 10 Commandments, EWTN. Okay, you shall not kill thy neighbor. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty obvious when you take it in context of 10 verses later, he orders the mass murder of entire races of people. That thou shalt not kill is not talking about everybody, right? But let's see.
Well, no, murder. So if it says
Kill.
don't murder. So if you can't murder and there's lots of people dying, that means the only two alternatives is they just violated that do not murder part, or it was somehow justified. So now we need to find out if they violated their own commandment and are guilty of violating it, or if it was somehow justified. So what would make justified?
Say it again. I was reading, I'm sorry. It's so hard to hear and read at the same time.
Oh yeah, try reading backwards. Where is the Ten Commandments? Exodus 20-something?
And there's two different versions of the Ten Commandments. I'm sure you know that.
And God spoke.
They're both different. Why are they both different? Why did Moses get one set of 10 Commandments, come down, break them, be like, I'll be right back, and come back with a different...
And got the edited version?
Yeah, he come back with a different set. Several of them completely different, some of them out of the fucking clear blue sky. Let's see here.
Do you happen to know which one murder is? I'm trying to read this thing in reverse, and I can't read in reverse. Huh?
What? Commandment?
The kill one. Murder one.
Mosea 13:21? 13:12? Oh, that's the Book of Mormon. Fuck, hold on. Wrong book. Here we go. Killing or murder. Multiple translation. It's the 5th/6th commandment, depending on which version of the 10 Commandments you're looking at. Varies translated to thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not murder. The imperative is against the unlawful killing of resulting in blood guilt. The Hebrew Bible contains numerous prohibitions against unlawful killing, but also allows for justified killing in context of warfare, capital punishment, self-defense. The New Testament is in agreement that murder is a grave moral evil and maintains the Old Testament view of blood guilt.
So, let's see.
I think there's been some Christians on here editing this.
Paranoid?
Paranoid.
Those Christians did it. Where did I put my car keys? Those Christians!
Oh, them dirty Christians. Identifies at least the list of 10 commandments that next to this, since this passage does not prohibit murder, adultery, theft, etc., but instead deals with the proper worship of Yahweh. Some scholars call it the ritual decalogue. The disambiguity of the 10 commandments of traditional understanding as the ethical dialogue. That's not very helpful, is it?
So, murder, slay, kill. First one is...
Where are you at on the? Are you looking at the Talmud?
No, I'm looking at the concordance. Premeditated, second, accidental, next is avenger. Murder, assassinate. Yeah.
What verse are you seeing that says "Thou shalt not murder" in?
Exodus 20:13.
Exodus 20:13. Maybe you could see what it said. What verse was it?
20:13.
20:13. So if we skip to 20:13.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just trying to find the closest I can find. Let me just look real quick, just to double check. I think it's 2013. Okay, so the closest I find is from 2013 to 21:15. I mean, you can't be any more. I mean, it's less than it's like less than it's less. It's just over a chapter away. I mean, he goes from "Thou shalt not kill" to "Whoever strikes his father or mother shall be put to death."
21:15.
So obviously, it's not just as equally as "Thou shalt not kill" or murder.
So, strike. Strike, smite, hit, beat, slay, kill. Smite, beat, scourge. So it seems that, let's see, the word...
Strong's H5221. Nacha.
So apparently that word can also mean kill or slay.
So he says, "Thou shalt not kill," but to go ahead and kill these people.
He says don't murder, so don't unjustly kill someone. And then if somebody could be said kills or slays your parents, then justice is served. There's no problem with that.
So then go to 22:19.
I just closed it.
Oh, no, don't close. Control-Shift-T will open the tab you just closed, by the way.
What? Control-Shift-T.
Yeah.
Control-Shift-T. Oh, cool. Okay, where am I going?
22:19.
$22. 19. Okay. Oh, so your problem is with, like, capital punishment?
That's not 22:19. That's not 22:19.
Exodus 22:19. Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death.
That's not the 22:19 I have.
What's the one you have?
Whoever sacrifices to any god except the Lord alone shall be doomed.
Okay. And remember what we talked about. Like, it's really hard to die. It's like worse than suicide by cop. Again, not trying to justify it, giving some context. So if you're sacrificing crap to another god or having sex with a sheep or whatever, people have to see you doing it, tell you to cease and desist, and the only way that gets taken any further is no, me and the sheep love each other. And then it goes on up the chain, and eventually, if you're absolutely defiant, which at this point, whatever the original crime was, that's not an issue. This is my opinion now. That's not an issue anymore. Your issue is that you're defying every single person around you who is like, don't do that. So it seems like you really have to want to die. Which, coincidentally, almost nobody ever died. I've tried to get exact numbers for how many people died, and all I can find, the most accurate thing I can find is people consider it a bloody generation. If one person is put to death under these laws in like 7 or something years. And all I can find is there wasn't many bloody generations.
I can name some places where like lots of fucking people died.
But apparently not according to these laws. Like the only instance I can find is somewhere it talks about the guy was gathering sticks or something in a field, and it was on the Sabbath, and he ended up dying for it. There may be some other things. I mean, I certainly aware of people dying in wars and fires and earth opening up and Red Sea and things like that. But according to the law of Moses, there's not a whole lot of examples.
Of people getting killed?
Under the law of Moses. Specifically because they violated one of these laws.
Like being a Midianite?
Midianite, those are people that wear things on their head. I think you mean like something else, right?
Mennonites. Midianites are the ones that even you are commanded to kill if you see one on sight.
Are you telling me I am commanded to kill if I see on sight?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so.
You know, I don't often dissuade people from the faith, but if this is your view of Christianity,
you wonder why.
Just take your time deciding on that.
Yeah, you ain't kidding, huh? Let's see. The Levites, they gotta go. We all know about that.
Did you say the Levites have to go?
Yeah.
They were the priest. No one's killing the Levites.
Well, if they,
Come on.
in charge of life in the tabernacle. Oh, if you approach the Levites in the tabernacle, then you have to kill them.
Well, is there anything else we want to chat about for a few minutes before I gotta get?
Yeah. Let's see here. What would it take? How heinous of a thing would Jesus have to say in order for you to disregard him as a spiritual leader? What if Jesus said to let's say what if Jesus said that it's best if billions and billions of people die needlessly? Would you say that would be a reason not to follow him?
Say that again. If Jesus said that billions need to die needlessly?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have more context? How would he say this? Like a peer or something? Or
I'm just saying, if it said that.
Just going down what your perception of a historical narrative is? Or
if he said, yeah, this is if ifs or fifths, you know. If he said, which I would say he said it by omission, that literally billions of people should die needlessly. If he said that, would you not agree that he shouldn't be a very good...
I would say if I honestly believed billions of people died needlessly, and I think there's a better example than that.
Yeah, because he could have prevented untold amounts of pain and suffering.
Yeah, like I'm trying to give you a little bit and make a might makes right, but that didn't really do it. That's just kind of but let's take it extreme. So if God said kill a baby a day because I'm God and I said so, then, and you knew this too, so God shows up or whatever and tells you and I directly to our face and shows us. We have no question. It's empirically verified, peer-reviewed. And God says, I'm God, kill babies every day because I said so.
Okay.
Both of us would be like, oh my God, no, that's horrible. But then, hopefully, if we're honest, would have a serious conversation with ourselves and decide if might makes right. I would love to say, you and I would both say, no, we're going to stick to our moral ground no matter what happens, no matter what punishment. We're not killing babies every day. Realistically, we honestly don't know until we're there, because I don't know if we could,
You might kill babies?
I don't know if we'd be pooping ourselves while we're trying to figure this out.
I know where I would be. I'm sorry. I don't have to question whether or not I would follow God on that.
Well, yeah. See, and I want to say that too. But I'm trying to be fair and give this analogy its diligence. So I'm hesitant to say, no, do whatever you want to me. I'm thinking, if truly a God exists and we're face to face with him, and whatever that looks like, that would probably be pretty darn rattling. So
no, that's not really the question that I asked, though. I mean, well, that's a pretty.
I think it puts it in a better light.
I was naming something that I believe he actually did, that I think he's actually guilty of.
Well, okay. So then I honestly don't. I would hate to say, well, I think these people needlessly died and they're floating in a hell because they didn't. They rejected God or something like that.
These can be Christians. I mean, we're talking about people of the faith here. He let both die and suffer needlessly and excruciating, extreme torture. I mean, we're talking some of the worst treatment that anybody has ever been through, and has been through, is in large part because of your God. And I can back that up, because is he all-knowing? Does he know anything? Does he know very much at all? Does he know more than we know right now? Does your God know more information than we know right now?
I believe so.
If that's the case, then as a moral being, he would have put in the Bible, wash your hands.
Or gave him the recipe for soap a few years earlier?
No, just wash your hands.
Well, I think for whatever reason, I think, certainly, I believe.
A few years earlier, they thought every disease back then. They thought every single disease, everything.
Well, we're bouncing around too much. Let's focus on something. So, I think lots of crap happened, and I certainly believe it would be within God's power to stop every bad thing from happening ever, because He's God. Why not? But
do that. Why
I
not
also
just wash your hands. You know how many people that would have saved?
Is this really about germs? No bigger picture?
Right. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that if he would have said that, he would have prevented the death and the torture of billions of people.
But then what would he have to say? Be extra careful and give us safety bags years before cars had them? Why would he stop at washing hands? He'd have to cross some threshold eventually, because if he tells certain people to wash their hands, he's got to tell everyone, and then he has to, go from there. Because if you're going to prevent germ spread by washing hands, don't stop there, tell us something else.
He did. He told us something instead of that. You know what he told us? He told us that it's okay to bloodlet. Do you know what that is?
To what?
Bloodletting.
I don't think I'm familiar with that.
You've never heard of bloodletting?
Bloodletting?
Letting, yeah. They used to think the Old Testament prescribes it. It is what they used to believe was a way to cure disease. And what they would do is that if somebody was fucked up, they would cut you and let some blood run out. They would let some blood go. They thought that would help you. So many people have died because the Bible prescribes bloodletting. It's it's unbelievable.
It seems like it seems like it was a good idea, maybe not for everything, but just a quick...
Never a good idea, ever. You will never go to the hospital and then practice bloodletting on you.
Well, first, that seems equivalent to leeches now. But secondly, it talks about this practice has all but been abandoned except for a few very specific conditions. Hypertension, reducing blood pressure. So, interesting. Well, okay, so does that mean, by that logic, should we be thanking God for telling people about circumcision?
Circumcision has also caused the deaths of many, many people.
Well, I think it's also...
there's people out there chewing dicks off with their teeth. Am I lying?
You know,
Do you know about this?
I have heard about it.
They do that.
You know, that's messed up, in my humble opinion.
Well, this is all proposed by your God. This is silly. I mean, I don't understand why you would believe anything that was proposed by such a wicked, nasty thing.
Well, because as with everything else we've learned in this discussion, it seems there's almost always more than meets the eye. And I think, rather than me latching onto the first good thing I read and, thinking, I'm going to go with this, this is right, this is the answer, I point my flag here. Or you taking the first bad thing you read and think, this is evil and horrible, I'm pointing my flag here. We should both withhold judgment until we've exhaustively explored the subject matter, and then, if we haven't got enough to point a flag, reserve judgment. If we feel we've exhausted something enough, like I believe the Talmud has exhausted, the slavery, the rape, all this other stuff so much that I'm pretty good putting my flag and saying, this is my firm belief how it was. So, if there's other things, though, where I'm not so certain, I'm okay with withholding judgment. My theism, ultimately, and we really do have to end, maybe 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
But my theism comes down to, I believe the claims of Christ. I trust him. Anyone else that does that and makes that decision to be cool with Jesus and live like he lived and trust him, that's it. It's so simple. And at that point, I believe people, it's so easy, they skip over that. They're like, okay, Jesus dying, that's all great, but what about slavery? I'm like, I don't care. It's not,
But Jesus
first of all, it's not like...
slavery.
Huh?
Jesus promotes slavery.
See, that's where I'd not point that flag just yet, because I believe it's just factually wrong.
You don't think Jesus promotes slavery?
I don't think Jesus promotes slavery.
Well, let me give you some...
I think there's stuff that talks about, if you are a slave, be a good slave. I don't know if I'd necessarily say Jesus gives his gold star saying slavery is great.
It doesn't only say that he says that it's not only that you should serve your master, but he also says that, this is in Luke chapter 12, or 47 through 48, the servant will be severely punishment, for though he knew his duty, he refused to do it. But people who are not aware, but people who are not, but people who are not aware that they are doing wrong will be punished only lightly. Much is required from much whom much is given, and much more is required from whom much more is given.
Now, Tim.
In the parable, I know, but in the parable, Jesus clearly approves of beating slaves, even if they didn't know they did anything wrong. That's what the parable's saying.
If you were a Christian, you would scare me, man. Like, you'd think the earth was 6,000 years old.
Jesus himself said, slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ.
Yeah, that part, I wouldn't say it's necessarily gold star slavery is cool. I would say if you're in the position of slave, be a good one. Why wouldn't you be if you're a slave? But to the parable part...
That's so terrible. You're as bad as him. Be a good slave. You're saying that's so disgusting. I can't believe you... Wow. You just said that if you're a slave, you should be a good slave. Wow.
Come on, Meow.
That's fucked up. You just said that.
Define slave. Indentured servant or slave of the South.
I'm going to try being owned and see how much that matters to you, what they call it.
Well, I don't think I'd be cool with it. And if I was a slave back then, no matter how non-severe or what?
You'd try your hardest to be a good slave?
No. Either I'd be cool because I'd understand that it was indentured servitude and it was a contract for 6 years that I was a slave to this guy.
If you're a Jew. That's only if you're a Jew. If you're from not a Jew, there is no time limit.
Who is Jesus speaking to? Is he speaking to Jews? So let's go with that. So anyways, what I would say is if, like I believe is historically accurate per Orthodox Judaism, if you had the title of slave, you're treated as equated today as an indentured servant. You eat the same food, same drink, same bed, same clothing, same accommodations, everything.
What?
Hold on. I'll give you a reference after this. Anyways, so the slave in the Bible is defined as you get all the same stuff your owners have themselves. So the same food, the same drink, the same stuff they have, eat, drink, you get all that stuff. It's very clear about that. You have to treat them like one of your own. There's like a Jewish proverb that's like, when you buy a slave, you're really buying another master. because the standards are so high that you must treat them just like you and the rest of your family. Anyways,
Unless you want
also, one more thing. So if that was true, then I'd probably be like, hey, I have a steady job contract for the next 6 years. I'm okay with this instead of fending for myself in the wilderness. However, if it was bad, and if I'm like, you know what, I don't want to be a person's property, I'm not cool with this, I don't want to be a slave anymore, then I'd be like, hey, I'll convert to your religion, and I'll stop being a slave. Or you could take it to the court or the townspeople, and make a case why you shouldn't be a slave. There's all kinds of ways out of these Jewish laws.
Not if you're a foreigner.
Huh?
Not if you're a Hebrew slave, you're right. There's a lot of ways out of it. You can only keep them for 6 years and all that sort of thing. But if you're a foreigner, and this is very Republican of the Old Testament, but if you're a foreigner, you can keep these people and you can pass them down to your children because they are your property.
Unless they make a case of the court, or they convert, or a couple other things, and they convert. There's other stuff like cases in the court and things, but the transcendent point is, if you want to convert, that is absolutely guaranteed you're not a slave anymore. So there's other things you can do, like make legal cases and appeal to courts and stuff like this, which I think rivals legal systems of today. But the guarantee is, if you don't want to be a slave for any time, convert, and you're out. I'm not saying that's the best way. In my opinion, I think it could be done better. But I'm not, a Jewish person in a Jewish culture living 4,000 years ago. So to that I say, whatever. I'll take these people's word for it.
All right. So have you seen that movie, God Is Not Dead Yet?
No, have you?
No, I haven't. So I say we plan on doing like maybe me and you can watch it together and then talk about it on a hangout after that.
I wouldn't mind that.
We should plan that. We'll as soon as the first decent bootleg copy comes available, we'll see it.
So I guess before we go, so to recap, what do you think about all the fun stuff we've had? Like, did what I say, since you weren't really aware of some of it, did it make sense? Or are you going to fact check this stuff now and make sure it's all?
I mean, you really didn't say anything I hadn't heard before. I mean, everything you said is basically excuses for the treatment of slaves or excuses for the murder of.
So when you say excuses, you mean you just disbelieve this stuff, or you think the Jewish people are lying, or?
Saying that it's not okay under any circumstances, let alone if a God says it's okay. Or I mean, the fact that you excuse these horrible atrocities is proof that, I mean, the whole idea of Christianity is to cover up the disgusting immorality of the Bible.
Well, I guess all I can say is, I guess I'm asking you to take me to my word, but if I honestly believed this stuff, the accurate version of this was disgusting and immoral and all this other stuff, then would probably be having a very different conversation. But the reason I don't is I certainly don't feel the need to justify some deity or to make intelligent or clever interpretations or excuses. I honestly don't care. Like if it was in the Bible that God said, hey, own slaves just like the South, beat the crap out of them because I'm God and I said to. Then I'd be like, and that was what I felt was the accurate interpretation. I'd be like, you know what? There's not a place to go from here. Does might make right or does it not? There's not really another answer.
However, you may purchase male or female slaves from the foreigners who live among you. You may also purchase the children of such resident foreigners, including those who have been born on your land. You may treat them as your property, passing them on to your children as a permanent inheritance. You may treat your slaves like this, but the people of Israel, your relatives, must never be treated this way.
Convert.
Convert? You don't convert to be born in a different place. You can't change where you were born.
No, you change your religion.
No, it says the people of Israel, not the people who say that they're converted. None of that.
No, that's again, we're going to the Talmud. Like, I don't know why I keep arguing a religion that's not my own. I get the same God. I guess that's why.
It's the same God. He at one time at least said slavery was good.
Like if this was during the afternoon, we could call a synagogue. Like we could call any synagogue you want. Everyone who is an observant Jew will tell you the same thing, and they'll give you the Talmud reference. And if we can read Hebrew, we can find it, or we can find an English interpretation or English translation of it.
You know who I think would argue my case the best? The people who argued for slavery in the South. You know what their number one witness was? I'm sure you know.
What was the first part of that? The people who would argue your case best is who?
The people who argued for slavery in the South. When they had all those court dramas about slavery and all that stuff.
Okay.
The number one witness called to the stand. What was it?
I don't know what the number one witness called to the stand was. What does that mean?
The number one reference for saying that slavery is okay.
I want to say a quick sentence. If you're going to say the Bible, I'll say the number one reason why slavery, I believe, was abolished is also the Bible, because people got this moral conviction that it was wrong.
They didn't get a moral conviction that it was wrong from the Bible. Everything about the Bible says slavery's okay.
Well, no, the dude that wrote, who was it? The dude that wrote the song Amazing Grace. He said, like, he owned slaves, and he felt like, after a certain time or whatever, he's like, you know what? This is wrong. Christianity does not own slaves. So he let them all go, wrote the song, and became a huge advocate, and, everyone else followed. So if the Bible, as you say, is horrible and evil, then these people totally got the wrong message from it because they cited the Bible and Christianity as a reason for abolishing slavery. And that's not abolishing like fulfill, that's like abolishing like stop right now. It's over.
But the number one reason that it was allowed, and the reason they argued to keep it, was the Bible, right? And
Well, say justified.
Have you ever read any of that stuff that they used to argue?
Well, yeah, but I mean that's like saying I could take an atheist paper on evolution and use that for some horrible evil means. And you're like,
the best arguments against slavery was human rights arguments. They weren't biblical reasons. It wasn't. There's nowhere in the Bible that talks bad about enslaving foreigners. Nowhere.
The whole treat others how you want to be treated seems pretty good. Do you want to be a slave?
Still,
don't own slaves.
Still, he doesn't.
Well, I mean, come on, you can't. I mean, this is stuff you can't get around. I mean, do you want to be treated like a slave?
Christians who are slaves should give their masters full respect, so that the name of God and His teaching will not be shamed. If your master is a Christian, that is no excuse for being disrespectful. You should work all the harder because you are helping another believer by your efforts. Teach these truths, Timothy, and encourage everyone to obey them. That's what Jesus said.
So slavery of the South, let's join hands and fight against it. That sounds bad. Slavery, like I have a contract and I'm cool with you because I'm not converting because it's a pretty good life. If you're willing, whatever.
Why do you keep talking about that kind of stuff? We're talking about foreigners. That's the kind of slavery that they used to address in the 50s, the 40s, and that's the kind of slavery they were talking. They're not talking about the fellow.
Are you talking about Bible days or the 50s?
What
50s? 1850s?
I'm saying that the arguments for abolishing slavery had nothing to do with how the Bible said we should treat a Hebrew slave, but instead how we should treat a foreign slave.
I'm not even. Why are you still talking about Jewish law? I'm talking about the reason cited is not because the law of the Bible. I'm saying because the message of Christ says love God and love your neighbor as yourself. We're not talking about Jewish law. Like, that's not what I'm saying people cited. I'm saying people cite all kinds of crap to start crusades and holy wars and stuff like this.
You think neighbor is just anybody?
Actually, whenever he talks about love your neighbor as yourself, I forget where it is, but right after that, one of the disciples, Peter, I think, says, "Who is my neighbor?" And Jesus tells a story about the Good Samaritan, and basically the walkaway is your neighbor is anybody who's in need, and you can help. That's who your neighbor is.
The Old Testament translation, and your Talmud would say this too, the translation of the word neighbor is actually thy fellow Jew.
What? No, we're in New Testament. We're speaking Greek. These are Greek authors.
Sure, but in the Old Testament, where these laws were originally talked about, they're talking about my fellow Jew.
Are you confusing this with Islam?
No.
I know they say that, but I know, I've never came across anything to make me think Judaism is like, hey, don't kill anyone except your fellow Jew. That's what we're talking about. I've never found anything that would make me think that. And you looked for it, and you couldn't find the reference you were looking for, which makes me, I'm reserving judgment. If you can find it later, that's cool. but I'm holding judgment now that you found it once and that you're telling the truth.
Mm,
Except we do need to shut this thing down.
okay.
I said that like 10 minutes ago.
We're gonna do the God is not dead discussion as soon as we get a chance. Dictionary of the neighbor. Once a lawyer. Okay. Well, I'll get up some more information on neighbor for you, and we'll talk about that next time. But it's been fun.
Yeah, we haven't got to chat in a while, so it was fun. Hey, is it cool wherever this shows up to download it and throw it on my channel as well?
Absolutely.
Where can you post a link to where I can download this thing at?
Yep. I'm just gonna say bye to everybody. We can talk after I stop the broadcast because they don't need to be bothering it. Everybody have a nice day.